Welcome to Plat Chat Valorant episode 44. All the fours, 44. I'm doing it like a bingo announcer. It's kind of cool, isn't it?
Dude, that was a cool intro.
Thank you. I've been working on it. I've been down the bingo halls, earning,
our 60+ audience is gonna love that reference. Your little bingo hall reference.
YouTube analytics say that there are a significant portion of our audience over 60, but it's actually just all the 12-year-olds who've put in the wrong age. Yeah, they've just put in their ages, like, oh, I was born in the year 1900, in order to access the naked yoga streams that are on this this website. Just a disease upon the earth. Much like this himbo sat next to me. How are the two of you doing?
You went from naked yoga
brutal
to me.
You didn't even drop the link.
I haven't done any naked yoga on YouTube, as far as I'm aware.
Well, listen,
but I mean,
buddy,
now
you might
that I'm
start
done, I'm looking.
That's
true. Now I'm looking for jobs, so it could be the next. Could be the next thing. Like, could be it. Like, I don't know. And I feel like I could get as hot and sweaty as the people would like. You know, I could definitely do it. So that's all I'm doing.
You've been uploading some thirst traps this week. You've been looking cute on the timeline this week.
Yeah, well, my roommate got a wig because she wanted to do cosplay, and so I tried it on. And honestly, she got it's sort of like a Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants situation, because that wig worked on like every single person. I don't know if we have Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants fans.
What do you mean it worked on every person?
Like, you could put it on and it fit everybody. Like, it was it looked good, you know? And like like the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. They I got a bonus photo with that too, because my other roommate then uploaded a photo of me from college when I was going to a Halloween party.
I'll pass on this one.
People were far more inflamed over this photo. They were far more inflamed over this one.
Yeah, because he looks like you played Dungeons and Dragons with Satan. Like, geez.
No, people were like, there's the demographic for the goth GF, and then they were like, well, what about goth BF? And that's
the little goth e-boy. Yeah, I like that. I can appreciate that. So when are you going to announce that you're becoming a hot tub streamer? That's my question.
Well, first of all, I don't know what you said, because for some reason Josh's mic is cutting out for me. I didn't hear that last part.
When are you becoming a hot tub streamer? Is that better?
Yes, that is much better. Now, I think that I'm going to do that and hot yoga at the same time. I'm going to do something revolutionary. I'll do hot yoga on YouTube, right? And then I will get into the hot tub and then switch to Twitch. So I'll just stream on both platforms. And then I'm going to hit all the demographics.
OnlyFans, where you'll add the naked part.
Yes.
I
that's
see.
exactly
I see.
So.
Balla's already got this suspiciously figured out. Suspiciously knows exactly how to do it.
I've already been ready.
Balla was doing a little nasty man hand rub when that photo of Avast came up.
I'm just saying, Avast is freaking hot. Like,
okay.
True.
Yeah, listen.
I mean, can't argue with that.
Not that one. Kurt, come on, man.
That's the one that the people like.
Thank you. This one is hot. Like,
okay. All right. Yeah, listen. That does it. That does it for Balla. All right. Let's talk Valorant, huh? Because that's what we're here to do. This isn't a bingo hall. I don't know who gave you that idea. We've got a patch 2.09, Viper nerfs. And they specifically said that this patch was designed to come in before Reykjavik. Yeah. So this is not a big patch, but the opening paragraph says, what did it say? It said something like, our aim is just to tweak the game slightly and get it into a healthy place before Reykjavik. Yeah, it's important we don't get too crazy with balance changes. Well, you kind of did that already a couple of weeks ago. You screwed the pooch on that one. That happened a month ago. You fucked the whole game up with these.
Yeah, they're trying to revert the damage done,
but they can't. They say reverting the damage done would be too crazy.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, look. Any crumb of damage they take off the instant decay is a step in the right direction, but this is but a step. No, I mean, I think it's still.
Yeah, what are you guys thinking?
30, right?
Yeah, went from 50 to 30.
Oh.
It helps, right? I mean, it helps. It's not going to be like, especially with some of the weaker weapons that aren't doing enough damage anyways. I think this like makes it so that the Phantom can't one shot anymore. Whatever way it is. No, the Marshal's already been like whatever. The Phantom now with the headshot It's not the same thing, right? It doesn't have the same effect. But the Vandal doesn't change at all, especially body shots and whatnot. So,
Wait, sorry. Can you explain the math to me? Why would the Phantom be affected by this?
the headshot with the Phantom is what, 140, whatever.
It's like 141-ish, 142, something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's still. I think the point was it's still can one-shot headshot when they come through. Something about the body shots changed too, where it's like 3 body shots from the Vandal, which was the same thing already, but the Phantom now gets one extra, has to do one extra body shot when they come through the wall.
Does it move the needle on Viper at all? Is she less oppressive? Is she less likely to get picked? Is she less defining for the meta?
No. I mean, I think she's still insane. And if you combine her with Astra, still insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit less annoying. Still really annoying on pistol rounds, for instance.
Yeah.
I mean, even just generally, just being down. Yeah, it's just... They just need to take Viper in a different direction if they're trying to make her a mainstay in regards to viability on all maps. I think that there needs to be a more creative approach, I suppose, rather than just tuning the numbers.
Yeah.
I think it's good for Brazil too. Sorry, go ahead, Balla.
I think that no matter what you do with the damage numbers, like people realize that Viper is good, and people realize that, you know, everything about her is actually like relatively good, especially with the other stuff, you know. So like the smoke still has decay, the mollies are still ridiculous, like all that stuff was more of a realization once they were like, holy crap, this decay thing is really broken. It showed all the other stuff that was broken, because like people are still diving through walls in pro play, right? Just coordinated. That's basically the same. They're still doing that. They're still timing it so it doesn't really make sense, but everywhere else it still has the same effects. So people realize that, and I don't think it's going to change. No matter even if you took away decay, I think people will still find Viper oppressive. Not gonna lie.
Really? Because I think the Viper would still definitely get played in some instances. I don't think it would get played on like Haven, for example, though. I just don't think it would get played on maps like Haven or whatever. So
we Ball and I are not hearing like half your statements, Josh. Like when you talk, it's like, well, I just. So I'm just like, what is he saying? I don't know what he's saying. But I feel like actually.
Wait. Kurt said we're pausing for a second.
Yeah. Hey, we fixed that, and now we're back. So don't worry about it. It's not going to happen again, hopefully. Avast, you were about to butt in and say something about what your opinions on Viper?
I was, right. On top of fixing, we're also talking about fixing Viper. And I honestly think, legitimately though, something overlooked, I feel like this Viper change might, if you are a Brazilian fan, and this is going to be the patch that's played to Iceland, you might have a little bit more hope. Because when I watched the Brazil games, obviously we're going to talk about them later, I felt like they were still a bit behind the meta, like at times. And I think like maybe Viper getting a little bit less strong is going to be good for them, especially since when they see a smoke, they're just going to be like, fuck it, me push, me go through smoke. And so like, I think I actually think that this change is like good potentially in the short term, but yeah, Viper's still really strong in her current state with the decay.
There were also a bunch of other things in this patch too. I mean, if we don't think the Viper nerf is going to move the needle too much, but it's going to make it, you know, maybe a little less must pick perhaps on every single map. All right, but there were some other changes too. An interesting one for me was, okay, they made some changes to Breeze. I think this is just like adding a curtain above certain doorways, a little bit like they did on the Haven Garage. Did you actually make a like really interested noise from that? From a tiny little curtain being added above a door?
Cool change.
Shut up. This one is cool though. The tactical timeout change, because this implies that they're going to coordinate this with a rule change for Reykjavik. So just to refresh everybody, the original rules for tactical timeouts that we've been using for quite a while in Valorant are that each team gets one tactical timeout per map, and it can only be 30 seconds. So they've now quadrupled that amount to 2 tactical timeouts per map, and each of them lasting 60 seconds. And for some reason, it freezes all player movements for while that's happening as well. So you don't just get like the players running in circles to try and not give away what their default is. What do you guys think about this?
I think there was a lot of people complaining about the fact that they freeze because the timeouts, I guess they were mostly using them to get extra time to do their setups. Which I honestly I think they have to think a little bit more about it now so they can use it at the beginning of the round and they don't have to like run over different places. But yeah, I don't think there should be any extra time for setups. I think that's kind of busted just to use a timeout for stuff like that. I think we now have 2 per game per team, which I think we only had really 1. For other things. So hopefully it'll be better. Hopefully, I think my biggest thing is that I'm hoping that now with it like really ingrained in the game, it's not just a like random pause match timer button, that it very clearly says who has the timeout, because that was my biggest gripe. It's like somebody called the timeout. We have no clue who called the timeout. We have no clue how long it's going to last or anything like that. So now that's built in the game, I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a good change. And in conjunction with more role for coaches.
Yeah, there's actually a coaching slot in the game right now, and they can call tactical timeouts too.
Yeah.
So
makes sense.
Okay, so they're integrating that with the coaches stuff where they can call the timeouts.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't confirmed that this is going to be part of the rules for Reykjavik, but why would they add it to the game right before Reykjavik if it wasn't, right? So it just seems like it's almost certainly going to be the case. I quite like it. I mean, the narratives around tactical timeouts, I think, are quite cool. Like when you see a team take one and then they make an immediate strategic change, I think that's a very clear narrative indicator that something's going very differently.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's overall like a good change. I'd say I think the only big complaint is like Balla said, like we just need a UI, like we need useful UI elements about like what, who, where, like giving viewers information.
Yeah.
Who's calling the attack pause? Wow. We still have that issue with like a bunch of utility.
Yeah, well, you talk about UI utility things. They've actually added extra stuff into this one as well. So remember when they said that they had color coded some stuff, but not for the observers. Well, now they've added it for the observers as well. So in theory, there should be some color coding here that like applies to observers as well. So yeah, the adjusted color of placeable utility on the minimap to match team color for observers. I don't know which utility is going to be colored, and I don't know whether it's going to look any good because it hasn't done so far, but maybe.
I think it will. The last time they had that change, we missed the fact that they didn't say on the minimap. So like I realized, especially I think we were doing the coach stream with Wyatt, I realized that it was colored tripwires in the game. It was like red. Yeah. Like you would look at it. So it was there. We just like it didn't really notice because by the time
for that.
Yeah.
Someone, surely.
Was that something that anybody needed?
Might have been like misunderstood. Like I used to be an engineer. I would do some stupid stuff where somebody's like, "Yo, we need this," and then I'm like, "Okay, I heard that," and then I make something completely different. That's probably what happened. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think that was all that was included in patch 2.09. It was just some tweaks before we get to Reykjavik itself. So yeah, I'm excited. I also one of the guys that works for Riot, who's been in our co-streams in the past as well, said that, I think he was in my chat and he said something like, there may or may not be a HUD or UI update for Reykjavik. So I think he's just trying to play very, not leak anything, but gives the idea that there might be some big graphical overhauls or like new elements introduced for Reykjavik too. And it's makes sense. There's the biggest eyes that have ever been on Valorant are going to be on Valorant right here. I mean, I think expectations for like 500k viewers would be pretty reasonable, considering that 350k was what NA peaked at recently. So, yeah, it's a big ass tournament.
All the regions, all at the same time. It's going to be big. I think that it'll be really, really rough if there's like UI desync and stuff like that. Yeah. Like the spoiling that happens, any of those bugs that happens, like
the spoiling was horrific at first strike.
The Red Bull clutch.
Oh my God.
Comes up. Yeah. Well.
Okay, there's also a new game mode that they've added into the game that they said went live called Replication. Apparently it's live right now. Have any of you gotten a chance to play it?
No.
Cool. Neither have I.
I'm saving my one time playing the limited mode for a future episode.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. I think the idea of it is that you go into the game and you all pick the same agent.
You vote for the agent that you guys want.
And everyone has to play it, though.
Yep.
Right? That is a game mode that I don't know who wants. Who wants this?
But it's funny, but it's a fun little game mode. It's nice to just get like new stuff, right? It's better to get like it's better to get some like fun content than it is to just be like nothing. I'd say, in my opinion.
I agree.
It's a limited time game mode.
Dude,
it replaces escalation, and I think that if it just doesn't strike me as something that's that fun. Am I just the moaning old man in the corner here?
Yeah, you're just being a little Scrooge right
Myrtle.
now. That's what you're doing. I'm gonna get the ghost of game modes past.
No, I'm not one of the hardcore esports people that's like, why did they spend developer time on this when they could be fixing the crashing errors? Because those are totally different teams. You're an idiot if you say stuff like that. You don't understand how dev teams work in the slightest. And it's important to get casual players in the game. What I'm questioning is, what I originally thought this was like, the Valorant version of URF, Ultra Rapid Fire, where you just have all your cooldowns available at all times, and you're just sending shit off all over the place. Instead, you're just locked into one agent for a BO9 spike mode. Is that what people are after? Is that the fun? Does that tickle the casuals?
Yeah, I think it does. I think you
just
underestimate the amount of people who want like the Bucky only gameplay where everybody has a Bucky, like that, like Spike Rush, for example. And this one, everybody has the same agent. Like there's a lot of people who hop on with their friends and they just want to like do something funny. That's basically probably a good portion of the people who play this game casually. It's just like,
and you gain extra ultimate
do some
points.
fun stuff.
Oh, really?
Right? So like you could, they said you get extra ult points. So like imagine you're like in a 5v5, it's like a game with only Killjoys, and then one round people pop 10 Killjoy ults. Like that's sort of like it was even in the trailer where like it was like a Sky game where everyone was Sky, and then like everyone popped their wolves on the other team, so it was 5 like wolves running down mid at somebody. So there could be like there could be fun moments. I think people can get into, like there's
you're selling me on it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think there's merit to be had. They're like, is it going to be the greatest game mode ever? Probably not. But will it be a fun little thing? Yeah.
Yeah.
Am I out of touch?
Yeah. No, it is the kids who are wrong. No, all right. I accept my status as the old boomer that doesn't understand what the casuals want. Yeah. No. Cool. All right. Pretty sweet. We have now to step into the esports sphere, and I want to kind of lay out what our plan is for this show. So last week we discussed Europe and North America. We talked about the teams that qualified out of Challengers Finals. We talked about the teams that are going to Iceland. We still don't know all of the teams that are going to Iceland because LATAM hasn't finished yet. So Crew is still playing against Infinity. I think that's happening literally today. It'll probably be happening as you're watching this episode right now, actually. So if you're interested, you can go and watch this. It's to decide the final team that makes it. And when we were doing our interview with Sassy and Sadak, they really highly rated Crew. So there's definitely Scrimbucks hype revolving around them. But
this is in LAN too, in Mexico City.
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, it is. Mm-hmm. This is in person because it's a LATAM South team playing against a LATAM North team, so they went to Mexico. The plan for this episode, though, is to review the Brazilian and the Korean scenes. There's still Japan and Southeast Asia, and then LATAM, which we'll do next week, along with hopefully doing a preview of like the actual matches that are going to be at Iceland, because we still don't know the format, by the way. It's like it's less than 2 weeks out, and we don't know the format. But before we get into the recap of Brazil and Korea, we've got some teams that have made changes. There's Rostermania happening over in North America and Europe. So North America, we're starting to hear TSM. Big news coming out of the TSM camp. They, having already made the shift to take Cutler out of the 6-man lineup that they had, they're now making a coaching change. So Tailored is no longer with the team, who's been their coach since they began the team, basically, I think. Yeah. And there's a report that they're going to be signing Jett, who was originally going to be signing with Envy, but then decided to take the TSM offer instead. So a pretty big change here for a team that's trying to find their path.
Yeah, it's always tough to say what's really happening with coaches in the current game right now. I feel like, unfortunately, it's it might be easier to see from the outside what they're not doing and then make judgments off of that versus knowing what they actually do within the team.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy for people to say that, oh, well, TSM they keep doing the same thing over and over that is losing them these rounds, etc. The strategy hasn't really developed. They didn't really do anything interesting with Astra. Well, tactically, is that do we associate that with coaching or what? Like, where does that go? You know? And then I think a lot of people just kind of automatically place that on the coach, where unfortunately, you just don't really know. But that being said, it has been a long time now with the same 6 on TSM, and they're just making a change.
Yeah.
I think it's reasonable to just try something new at this point.
Yeah.
I think that TSM does need somebody who will hold them more accountable in a sense. I don't know if Tailored was doing that. I don't. Again, like Wyatt's saying, we really don't know. But I do think that they need somebody who will, push them to do certain things and think about certain like I've always said, it's like mentality thing. Like think about how to improve that, how to improve your momentum throughout games, not be as swingy for TSM. I think a coach can help with that significantly. I don't know if Jett is the guy to do it. We know a little bit about Jett's coaching from CS and also NRG when he was playing or when he was coaching for Valorant. But who knows? It could be that spark that gives them the extra ability to make hurdles above their momentum and mentality issues, I think.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Like, so because it seems pretty clear that TSM were lost in the sauce, like heavily deep in the ragu. So I'm wondering, like, coaching seems like a pretty obvious choice, like to pin some blame on, because it wasn't like TSM's players are like bad, and like they had like potentially still the best opper in North America and like one of the best duelists, and like they definitely have a lot of star power. So when you watch them play, and then we also used to praise the same team for the decisions they made when they're like, I remember like way back, like right when the meta started shifting after like First Strike-ish, I believe, or somewhere around there, and TSM was still playing some wacky, like they tried their triple duelist things, like in the very early parts or end of 2020, I can't remember around what was happening, and we're like, oh wow, this is really cool because like this is fitting their style. And then like the meta continued to shift, and it's like, oh wow, well they're still doing the same thing, and they haven't like changed anything since then. So, and they just haven't like fixed any of their issues when it comes to their tempo, when it comes to the rotations, map control, like all these things. So it seems kind of easy to kind of put some of the blame on Tailored, even if it isn't Tailored's fault, right? Because that's like something you would associate a coach fixing in a game like Valorant. But then the second question is Jett the answer? Because like NRG's had some more success towards the end of Chet's tenure, but was that Jett when they were also pretty mediocre with him for a long time?
Yeah, it's tough to say. And yeah, I mean, that's what you're saying about TSM. It's like they have simultaneously managed to not change, yet they change in like appearance every time we see them. Like the physical comp that we see them running, the agents are different, yet nothing actually significant changes in regard to how they approach the game. But yeah, in regards to Jett, it's kind of like the same thing I just said. I don't really know what he was doing with NRG. All we know is what they were failing at, where they were missing the mark. I mean, they didn't have a lot of success with roster moves. They made a ton of transactions. They bought players that they didn't use. They ended up with their best roster now, partly because one of the players they signed was harassing a Tarkov streamer or whatever and got kicked. Yeah. So they like accidentally ended up getting an open slot and then could sign Android.
Jett was presumably the person as well that bought Kotler out of his contract for a literal Bugatti, and then put him on the bench almost immediately afterwards and had to go back to the organization looking for more money to sign another person. I don't know.
That's the problem. We don't know. Again, it's like I don't know which decisions in regards to the roster he was making, and then past that, it took them so long to figure out how to approach the game in regards to what agents the players would be playing. They were switching constantly. They couldn't settle on anything. Also partly in tandem due to the roster moves. It took them ages, I think, to even get up to present day in regards to the meta. I mean, there was that long stretch of time where it's like, holy shit, man, they're doing the same things that we've seen all summer at that point in the Ignition series. They were doing it in like late fall into it's like, oh my God, they're so far behind. So it's just, But again, what if that falls on him? What if that falls on their in-game leader, Daps?
Yeah.
What if that like where does I don't know.
Am I wrong with the timeline here? But it felt like when NRG started to get good, Jett left.
I mean, they've been the best result they had was this last. It was stage 2.
Yeah,
and he wasn't there.
Yeah,
but
that doesn't like he might have.
But
put in
they
some
also
of
had
the
their best
groundwork in
roster.
place.
Yeah. So,
but I think the roster moves are the one thing that you really can attribute to the coach. Like if he's not making the roster moves, that is maybe more of an indictment of like their belief in him. Like the coach should be empowered to make roster moves like that. I fundamentally believe that is what should be happening on these teams. And if it's not, then it's a problem with the organizational structure. Your players should not be in charge of what roster moves are happening on the team. I know that was the way that it had been done in CS and stuff, but that is a bad way of building teams. It's terrible. You end up getting in like, cliques and people blaming each other, and you don't have that objective view. And also, you just, as a player, don't get to analyze whether the cost-benefit ratio makes sense. Whereas a coach is in that position talking to management and can make those kind of decisions. I mean, surely he was in position to make those. If he wasn't, then that's worrying as well because of all the different changes that NRG made, including bringing over players that had bad reputations or had large buyouts.
I think that's like a really interesting topic and conversation in general, though, because you mentioned how CS was like that. But in general, the coaches are CS coaches who are very, very much friends with the team and the players and stuff like that. So almost there's no difference between a coach having the say and a player having the say, because it's the same, it's the same type of person doing it. Yeah, maybe they have a little bit more conversation with the orgs and whatnot, and maybe that's where it's going to move in the future. But right now, I think there's a lot of teams who came from CS, players who came from CS, who are adjusting to the new like orgs, are focusing on really managing the rosters and stuff like that. Because there's probably only a select few of those players who were actually exposed to like, a Cloud9 who was handling the roster from the coaching perspective or the general manager perspective or anything like that. I think that's a super interesting topic.
Yeah, it does worry me when the same coaches get cycled around from team to team and they just swap over and over and over. This happened early in the Overwatch scene, and all of the players, all of the coaches that ended up doing rotations like that eventually just got phased out, and they didn't end up being the actually good coaches. That, I mean, there are obviously some that are going to go from team to team that are good coaches that end up just going elsewhere and having success, but a lot of that swapping around seems to just be that the lack of transparency into what really goes on from a coaching perspective helps for career security as well, because you can't tell when people are being bad as well as you can't tell when people are being good. So that obfuscation actually helps people continue their careers, because if you're in TSM, you probably can't tell what Jett did for NRG either. You're just talking to the players and trying to get a sense of like whether or not they really know what was going on.
That's the thing, but it's just tough. But from all you can really say is, like, from the outside, what did NRG really do during that entire stretch of time?
Well, they were iterating, and they eventually got in the right direction.
It took a long
time.
And I don't even
involve the removal of Jett at some point, or removal, departure, whatever. Because I think at some point Jett did say he left NRG to look for other opportunities or something in Valorant and CS:GO. So I don't know really whose decision that was, but it feels likely.
I think we saw that. I think he tweeted like, "I've stepped down." Like, and again, that's like you really can't trust anything like that.
Mr. Jett, I would like to ask you to retire. I have now stepped down. That shit does really happen all the time. I'm not saying that it happened in this instance, but it really does. Like, you can't trust exactly what people say on public.
I think what we've seen so far about coaches and like player interactions with coaches is that actually the players have had, like, especially when you think about T1, for example, and the whole fraud situation and the whole, like, all that stuff scream to me that the players are trying to get them to choose who their coach should be and stuff like that. So it almost feels like you're right in the sense that the players still have a massive control. And I think that makes sense when you talk about some of the personalities and status of some of the players that are on all these different teams. They can make demands at this stage of the orgs, right? Because they're just like that. They're good at where they're at, and there's not as many free agents anymore and stuff like that. So
yeah, they're
it's
big
really
brands
hard.
and they're valuable. To get back to TSM though specifically, I do think it was necessary for them to make a coaching change, because even if Taylor is a great coach, and the players were tweeting about it afterwards, where they were like reaction emojis of being like, "Oh, I'm sad you're leaving," or I think it was, I think it might have been Sabrosa, but I might have got the player wrong, who tweeted something like, "If you want a guy who's going to commit all of his time to making you the best possible, then pick up this guy." So, you know, a reference of dedication at the very least that Taylor had to the team. But I do think that a coaching change was necessary, because TSM lacked vision. They lacked they needed someone to steer them down the right path. And I think that kind of big picture perspective is something that a coach can bring, and a coach needed to bring in this instance. Maybe Taylor provides a lot that would be useful for a different team because his focus was in a different area. But TSM don't need that. TSM need a coach that can give them an overarching vision for their team of like, these are the things you need to focus on. This is the pathway we're going to play, and this is how we're going to improve. Because trying out these bunch of different comps and still carrying on playing the old style and not really focusing on the actual things that matter, which is your play between each other and your ways that you're playing the macro game, those are the things that are going to make you improve at least to a top tier 2 level, which they're not even at that point at the moment. They're slumping further and further behind.
I suspect these will not be the last changes we'll be seeing from TSM this year, at the very least.
The subreddit is popping off with like leaks of TSM's comps and stuff on different maps.
Playing Sage and whatever's happening. But
Yeah, people love the idea of TSM making a redemption arc.
Yeah, I mean, every time there's a new esport, whoever is on top at the beginning, they just get an unbelievable amount of clout, dedicated fans. People love that first good team. It always happens. I don't think this is going to be the last moves. And if you're talking, I mean, I hate that I keep going back to the NRG thing, but when you're talking about they need someone with a vision, I mean, did NRG ever have a vision? I mean, it looked like they were lost. I don't know. Listen, if Chet can turn it around, that would be excellent, because TSM being a good team is good for the scene and it's entertaining.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So would like to see it.
Yeah,
I just don't suspect that it will be happening here.
I currently don't think that this is enough yet for TSM. I think they still have to make another change. I don't have faith. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, 100% agreed. I mean, but I do think we'll see Taylor likely end up somewhere else, because right now it seems tough to because there are not a lot of coaches in the game with like his accolades still currently that has had like brand recognition.
Like 2 Ignition Series,
and then a second place in First Strike.
Yep.
So like, you know, even though they're kind of like, we're getting close to cave painting era history, like it is still valuable assets in someone that has had a career. So it's very likely Taylor will still end up somewhere else. And then we'll really get to see the judge, right? Because like when a coach goes multiple teams, that's when you really figure out like, what is their contribution like generally? Because you can see like the performance of their teams, and also not just the performance, but more so, how do they look? How do they perform? How do they fix their problems, right? Yeah, how do they change? And I think this is like the true test for both Chet and for Taylor, wherever he goes next, is like, or were they just one? I mean, Chet, you can't even argue is even a one-hit wonder yet. Like he hasn't even had an album go platinum. Like at least Taylor had some options.
Maybe in Valorant,
in Valorant. I mean, in Valorant specifically, not CS.
Because Chet definitely has proved his worth.
Yeah. Not. We're not talking about CS though, because like it's specifically Valorant.
Yeah. Also, the real coaching shift is likely to happen with people that at the moment are not coaches. Like if you think like 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line, the majority of the greatest coaches you'll see in Valorant are probably just dicking about doing other stuff at the moment, or they're players that have yet to transition into that role, or something like that, or they're coaching some real lower level team at the moment and they just haven't quite got the experience or the whatever to become the great coach that they will eventually be. It's quite rare that the people who are coaching very early teams continue and get better and develop and get better and better and become the the greats later on. There's just a natural turnover, the same as there is with players, but it's easy to tell with players when they drop off. It's very hard to tell with coaches when they're not actually providing value.
Yeah.
It's really
It's almost
difficult.
like at the beginning, you really the players could be the guys who are really driving any sort of anything, right?
Definitely.
But until you actually bring a team from not doing well to very well, and you could see that you're not necessarily learning the lessons that a coach needs to learn in Valorant at that point.
That was an excellent point though, Vest, about you need to see it twice. I think like there's a lot of judgments being thrown around about coaches as it seemed so early. It's just coaches on their very first team, and there's a lot of blame being thrown their way when genuinely just there's no real way to know. So that should be just the rule of thumb.
The other part of this as well is that presumably Jett is doing well when it comes to like coaching trials, because the report was that he turned down an offer from Envy as well. So he's he's at least impressing players management enough when he's doing short-term stints with teams.
But Envy doesn't even have like a coach at all currently.
No.
So like technically, like who knows what that means, because Envy's like, well, there's a coach on the market. We need a coach. And Chet's available. Like, and how many good coaches are there really out there currently that they know of, right? So
Sure.
Could be that situation.
Talking about NRG though, NRG are apparently also reportedly signing a coach, which is JoshRT, who used to be a player, and other people are going to be way better at describing his history than I am, because I'm pretty ignorant of this guy. What do we think about this? NRG, I think they've been coachless since Jett left the team, and they've just been finding this recent success on their own, similar to Envy.
Josh has been with them.
Oh, right.
It's just been
under the
it's been behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah. So
at least that's the rumor.
Yeah, that is the rumor. That seems pretty credible. So if I remember correctly, he had, I don't know, someone was tweeting, he was tweeting, they were tweeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so
he was
who
playing
is
for
this
a
guy?
long time in challengers, in the like open stages and stuff like that. So I don't know when he stopped doing that and actually started, because in my mind, I honestly think I saw him in opens too, like the second to that, because I've been following him. He was one of my former teammates. He was an IGL from one of my teams. Like, he's been a guy who's been in the scene. I think this is going to be his first like major coaching gig. But he was looking for opportunities in managing teams and stuff like that, because every single team that he made had great play. Like, he would scout the best players that were completely unknown, and all of a sudden they'd get poached from him. And then the teams that he's on would suck because of that. That's gone forever. He was on teams he had this team called Prospects, which was basically just grabbing players and putting them in Premier and doing well with them. They were always a middling team, and then they would get poached, and then the next season they'd do it all over again. There's been so many good players that came through Josh. So yeah, I think this will be good.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing this. Yeah, he was doing the same thing in Valorant. Yeah, I think he has a proven track record. There were several.
Well, that's good then. I mean, that's
Prospects,
the type of personality that you really want to see in Valorant in particular, because an emerging scene where a lot of it is pre-established talent that's come over and had a name and then just like got on teams early. It's good for both organizations and for players to get a personality that has a track record of actually building rosters that are not built on a previous brand and like notoriety, because it's such an early game that there's still so much talent that is still waiting in the wings that hasn't had the chance yet, because in the beginning, everyone is suffocated by just the big names and the large follower counts. And so Josh could be exactly what NRG needs and what Valorant needs, even if he doesn't stay with NRG, because he could be the start of like the swap of like, man, this Josh guy is kind of pounded by just picking up someone with 20 Twitter followers, and he's 17 years old, and like we have some guy that we're paying like a $10,000 a month that has a big name, but we haven't won a match in like 3 months. So like, I feel like this could be like a really good shift if Josh actually is gonna live up to the rep, hopefully.
Yeah,
I think he will. He's like a really smart guy. He went to like UMD for I think engineering or whatever. He's been playing since like he was a kid, like 12 years old or something, in Counter-Strike, like really just IGLing, thinking really, really hard about the game. I think that his personality will actually fit more as a coach than IGL, an actual player. because to me, he's always like a soft-spoken guy, not really assertive or anything like that. But as a coach, I think he has the time to really be that way. And yeah, I think this would be really, really good for NRG. I hope that Josh can really develop into somebody who's good, because to me, it's a huge vouch all the way through.
Sure. I mean, if he's already been working with NRG, they have in recent times been like actually completed that development that their team was that we were talking about previously, where they were lost for a long time and then found their way towards the end. Be interesting to know how much of that was him versus Daps looking into the crystal ball and realizing what was going on, or figuring out his mechanics. You know, maybe they just taught them all mechanics. Fuck knows. Okay. We also have roster moves happening. So not just coaching staff moves, but roster moves too. And the biggest one to be announced recently within North America is XSET, who have benched WeDid and presumably trialing replacements as well. So this is a pretty significant move, I think. Not just because WeDid was a pretty decent player, but also I feel like WeDid's flexibility and the pocket picks he had opened up a lot of styles that XSET used that were that were a little defining to how they played. Also, what is he wearing? Is that an XSET
What,
onesie?
you don't like that? You don't like the drip?
He's got the XSET. He's got the full.
Is it a
XSET.
onesie?
No, it's not a onesie.
Oh,
Not
it's
a
a
onesie.
hoodie
He's
and
got the
joggers.
he's just got the matching thing on. It's
Looks like the
pretty-
Globo
right,
Gym
that's
Purple
impressive.
Cobras, though. Dodgeball. Just a little bit.
I like that he's still repping the set even in his thank you WeDid departure announcement.
Yeah, I think he did say something funny as well when he in his like stepping down thing.
Yeah.
I think he just put in like hashtag rep the bench, which is pretty funny. He's in good spirits despite getting benched from his first.
I've used that hashtag before. WeDid and I we'd get along. We'd get along there as fellow benchers.
I think he'll be fine though. I think he'll be able to make it on another team. I think the bigger question, honestly, is what does this mean for XSET? Is this a move they needed to make? What direction are they going in? JC Stani. Is that going to help them? I don't know. The thing for me is that the problem with the team was not an individual question. It was what we talked about in the previous episode with them going out. It had all to do with how they approached their attack habs. They were just tragic. They need help with that more than anything. So what can they do to fix that? Well, JC Stani is a free agent. He is playing the same role as WeDid.
Has been IGL before.
Has been in IGL, so maybe he can help them with their attack sides. He can do a bit of calling in those situations. That seems like it would be the move to make from the outside.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know. Regardless, I don't love that they made a move. Honestly,
You don't think they needed to make a single move? I think now is the perfect time for teams like XSET to make big moves.
I'm not a fan of big moves when the problems are so clearly not to do with the roster and all to do with the approach.
But I think also a team like XSET has been able to make top 4 finishes consistently, and they are looking for more than that. And I think that even if you solve the strategic problems with XSET, they're unlikely to be able to still win a tournament in North America. I think they're still like, they're going to get deeper and deeper, but it does feel like there's a ceiling on this team, in my opinion, that it is not at the top of the North American scene.
Perhaps, but is WeDid being removed what will put them at the top?
I'm scared. To me, WeDid was the soul of the team. You know, he was the guy that I would have loved to have on TSM, for example. He's the guy that keeps the spirits high. He's the guy that will clutch in the moments that you need him to, you know? He's the guy that's vocal about the team and all sorts of different things. I felt like, yeah, BCJ was maybe the guy who was IGLing and whatnot, but without WeDid, I didn't think that there was an XSET, to be honest. That's what scares me. So where is the change coming from? Why is it being made? And how do they fill the gaps that WeDid, in my mind, clearly provided so much benefit to the team?
maybe it's part of a larger overhaul here for them. Like maybe WeDid isn't the only person that they're going to be changing. Because I mean, it is kind of roster moves are kind of more of an art than a science, and that like you're slotting around, you're trying to slot around players as you find them, and you have to start somewhere. And if you believe that WeDid, because also who knows how WeDid actually functioned, like was WeDid's presence part of the reason they struggled on attack, not because of his personal skill, but maybe because of like his comms or like what they provided. Like, you know, it's tough to realistically say without being part of their comm structure, right? Because everyone can agree that WeDid was good enough to hold the top 4 level of NA at this point, but it seems like they didn't ever have, aside from like some burst of brilliance for like Purer and such, like it never seemed like they were going to be winning tournaments like Sentinels. So, or even like Envy, and when Envy's been playing really well. So like, I don't know. And then I think most lately version 1. So like, where do they go here is my question. WeDid being removed is one thing, but where do they go from here is the real question.
I think the obvious thing that this is pointing towards is JC Stani. I think that
they're getting Stani.
I feel like that's because otherwise I don't think you make a bench like this without having a player ready to slot in. And
yeah,
I mean, the XSET is an improvement over Immortals in terms of their recent results. And if JC Stani thinks that he can take XSET to the next level as well, then now you're talking about a team that might be able to crack in and make some finals of tournaments or something like that, you know? They were already making the semifinals pretty consistently. Yeah, they didn't manage to in the most recent tournaments, and they got beaten out by, you know, they kind of bombed out of Challengers finals, but they have been consistent apart from that. So I could see that being a pretty solid move. And also, I think that XSET, even though WeDid's flexibility allowed them to change their roles around quite a lot, perhaps they want more of a focus on like, these are the roles that people want to play in order to solidify what their agent pools are, allow people to specialize a little bit more and get shit down. Because am I wrong in saying that WeDid didn't really play Astra for this team? It was Arten whenever they played.
Yeah, it was Arten, which was a bit odd. He played a number. I mean, he was playing Viper. He was playing Phoenix.
Yeah,
he was doing a bunch of different stuff. And
that's
Arten
credit to him, but also it makes the team a bit weird in terms of them having to swap all of their different roles around. And I imagine that that's quite difficult to get like a real structure going when that is chopping and changing so much.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Listen, I mean, I'm not opposed to them making a move. I suppose I find it a little bit disappointing because I feel like there was so much room to grow outside of roster changes that we didn't really get to see XSET in their original existence's peak. Because I don't think it's far-fetched to believe that they could be on the level of or like version 1. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility, given the talent on the team. Their willingness to put in work as to their approach to the game. I think they were just so off the mark in what they needed to fix in the downtime between these last 2 tournaments.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just more disappointed than I am like disappointed rather than I think this is a bad decision. I think it's fine. And I think that WeDid will also be fine and be able to make on another team, honestly. I mean, I think there's a number of teams that could use a versatile, solid player.
Yeah. I don't think they were off the mark when they were trying to make the change. I mean, when we talked to BCJ, it was like, it seemed like a really big focus was to try to change their attack halves, right? Was that not the impression we got
felt
from
like
him?
He already felt like they did. That was what he was saying, and they did not. So... yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say.
Yeah,
I guess.
Okay. I
think
have
it's
one
fine,
question. Where's the like? I know JC Stani played with BCJ. Is that the main reason why we think that that's going to be happening, or is it just the timing?
So it fits their roles.
Yeah, timing, really role.
Well.
There isn't another team that's necessarily looking for like the exact stuff that Stani brings, and also. I don't like people in my chat were saying like Stani to TSM or something, and that doesn't make any sense because Stani left Immortals of his own volition to get a better team for himself, to get a better deal and a better team for himself. The guy who's like deliberately becoming a free agent. That was a very specific, clear thing that was communicated. It wasn't some bullshit, oh, we've parted ways, you know? Like they very clearly said, I am leaving this team. I've chosen not to renegotiate and extend my contract. And fuck knows what's going on with Immortals as well, because they're having their own problems over across the board when it comes to like the Overwatch League and stuff, not willing to invest in talent. So I can't imagine the deal was particularly great. But going out onto the free market, Stani to me looks like he wants to go to a better team, and there aren't that many options. Like Immortals was still hanging around, like what, 8th, something like that. Maybe a little lower, but they were still in the top 10. There aren't that many teams that you can go to that would be better attractive options, and I think XSET is clearly one of them that would be an attractive option. So I think it makes sense from both parties, the decision there, which is why I think it's likely to happen. But I'm not saying that I know it's going to happen, because I don't. But it just does seem like the most likely outcome.
No, I think it's good logic. So leave it at that.
Okay. While is anyone else a little surprised at how chill North America has been in terms of roster moves? I thought the shit would be blowing up. I really did. I thought that people would be fucking TNT, boom, on their whole rosters if they hadn't had success recently. There's like a tier gap between Sentinels and everyone else. Why is nobody trying to invest in like a super team?
I mean, they could be, but it could just be a longer process, you know? I feel like a lot of these teams, because also in the current, from my understanding as well, and this started in the beginning of Valorant, is a lot of orgs currently view, especially if they've had some success currently, like it's one thing if you've been pretty meh for a while, like Dignitas, you know? Or like you've had like, you know, if you've been a bad team, but like if you've been a team that's had success, a lot of these orgs currently view their rosters as like, this is a long-term investment. We're holding for a long time until we actually see big movement happening. So if you have like a roster that you find is decent, then from my understanding, a lot of orgs are willing to just like sit on it a bit because there's just not a lot of huge reasons to make big moves currently, because there's tournaments happening, blah, blah, blah. But you know, there's always those rumors out there of like, well, what happens if like we franchise later, you know? And like, well, do we want to like commit and spend all this time when we can like wait to save our movements later? Where is the scene going to end up, right? Because we're still really in like the very beginning protozoa stages of it. So I feel like that's where a lot of orgs are at.
Protozoa.
Yeah, I feel like that's where a lot of teams are at, is like they're willing to sort of sit there, especially some of the teams that have already had success, because like, well, we can take time to figure it out, because what's the downside, right? Like we remain pretty good, still get some return, and then we just continue to wait to see what develops.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, especially from the perspective of teams like 100 Thieves and Envy. I just thought there would be more roster moves within like the developmental teams before that to really make a push to get to the top. But I think it's quite difficult.
Still time.
There's still time.
Yeah, there's still time. They could be doing it right now. We just don't know. It could be happening.
Well, this is why I bring it up, because it is happening in Europe right now as well. There are some major shuffles that aren't just happening within the tier 2 scene. It's actually in the tier 1 scene that all of these shuffles are happening, because teams are trying to... It seems like it all began when Carlos from G2 decided to drop the bag, and they're pretty much... It seems like the only organization that's willing to pay big money for results in Europe. Everybody else is, you know, trying to be a bit more conservative and like, we have a good team, we're going to sit on it, etc. And G2's just decided to throw cash around to try and get back to the top of the scene, because that was their brand at the beginning of it. And so Nell put out this whole report, which wasn't... I don't want to say that it was like a... actually, I think it was Nell. It might have been somebody else. But he put out like a secondary report after his initial one talking about G2, which is like, here's the moves that we believe are happening right now. They're not confirmed, but these are the moves that are happening and being considered at the moment within the top European teams. There's crazy shit.
There are a lot.
I don't know if you can find the article, Kurt, but just going through the article would be just a fun thing to run through vaguely, because not all of them are going to work out, but like starting with the G2 roster, there was a huge amount of stuff going on there. And that has now been pretty much confirmed. Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
So this is the G2 roster. They're making these changes. We'll go through the G2 roster later on as well, because they've like a separate report that Zeke and Cold Mentor are getting traded. So we'll skip past this and we'll return to G2 afterwards. But yeah, Heretics shit is complicated. Ardis and Padatek are apparently moving over to Heretics, having left G2, and they're going to rebuild the team. And like, what's the name of the guy as well? The coach that's like a famous coach from CS that's been implicated with it as well. Oh, bollocks. I can't remember the name. Whatever. But yeah, they're going for like a big redo too. So this team could look mental. Like I mean,
yeah, they're just. I mean, it's essentially they just cut both teams in half and switch them over.
Yeah,
the old swapperoo.
Yeah, they just did a little flip. They just swapped some players around. I mean,
does this benefit either team? Here's my question right here. When you can see these two paragraphs on the team. So for anybody who's trying to follow along at home, this would be a roster of Nuki, Avova, Mixwell, Pith, and Coldamenta. That would be G2's roster. Whereas Heretics would look like Paditek Ardis, Lowell, and who? I don't even know. Is that better for either team? I guess it's an upgrade for G2.
It's an upgrade for G2. Their results this year have been bad. Aside from that Red Bull tournament at the top of the year, they haven't done anything in the actual Champions circuit, which is what matters.
Right.
Yep.
So this is an upgrade for them. Will it take them to number one? Well, I mean, their goal, obviously, their goal is to be number one. The money says they want to be number one. They're trying to be the best team.
I don't think this does it.
Is this going to do it?
I think this is close, and it will put them in the running. But I don't think this does it as like super team. You've paid to win essentially. This isn't a pay to win team.
No,
this is
a lot of this hinges on Mixwell's success as well for this new G2 roster because Mixwell,
definitely,
like he took he was at one point looking to be one of the best duelists in Europe, and people could have made the argument that he was the best potentially, but now he's just been struggling a bit, and it's such an important role. So I feel like so much of this rebuild hinges on, does Mixwell get back up to form?
Definitely.
Especially since Mixwell has spent a lot of time on Raze, and Nuki's best hero that he plays all the time is Raze. So it's like, or not hero, but Agent. Yeah. So like,
I guess Mixwell's got to be just playing Jett, I assume, for this roster, because either the Jett or they'll go way outside of that, and maybe he picks up some of the supportive roles as well. Like maybe he tries to learn Breach or Sky if they want to play solo duelist comps and stuff.
Sage, something like that.
Or
they just do the typical like NA thing where it's like he plays Jett and also Raze when Nuki's not playing Raze because Nuki's playing Reyna. You know, they could do that sort of flow chart as well.
But this to me does not scream G2 are going to win. And when I look at the Heretics roster, it now just seems like Heretics is a bit of a mess. And frankly, I feel so annoyed that the situation within Heretics got to the point where they wanted to explode their roster. Because over a larger time period, like over the course of, if you include the tail end of First Strike up to now, so like the last 5 months, they've been the best team in Europe. Like they've had the most success. They've had the most results. They didn't make it to Iceland, but neither did the people who were competing for that role of best in Europe. Teams like FPX or teams like, who else is in that conversation? I guess Fnatic is now actually making inroads there. But this team had serious talent and a winning record too. And they just blow it up.
The crucial question there, though, is would they have kept winning without Nisao? And I don't know. I think that Nisao having to go was the nail in the coffin.
Yeah.
I mean I think that was kind of that marked the end days. But
I got the impression that Heretics was like a we just got good out of nowhere type of team that as soon as they have a spark of bad results, I thought that they would implode at each other. I think that was the feeling I got from that team from probably after Masters 1. Just immediately, I just felt like if anything went wrong, these guys were not sticking together because they all want greatness, it seems.
Yeah. And it's also interesting just looking at the G2 roster and seeing that like Coldamenta is going to be IGLing, who has only so far proven himself in one tournament, and we don't exactly know how like I mean, I guess with hindsight, like the results in this most recent tournament weren't too bad for him, but I think it's the best IGL that G2's ever had access to, for sure. But I don't know how he's going to be able to work with, like, you have two pieces from Heretics who like to play really contacty, and then you have people from G2 who like to play very like aggressive on defense. Yeah. And then you have Coldamenta who like to run a bunch of really weird compositions. That's three very different styles that you're trying to mesh together there. Finding an identity is going to be hard.
Yeah, he's got pressure. Oh my goodness. Carlos lurking over top of him. This is like when the failing businesses bring in the CEO to try to overhaul everything. Golden has got hard work ahead of him. Holy moly.
Yeah,
Two
but
different
Bone Cold talked
teams
him
that
up.
yeah, he did talk him up. I find it weird though, because he seems like one of those prep guys. And G2, historically, at least Mixwell and everybody else, seem like they're not so far into the prep, because remember how they did decently this time was when bringing in Aussie as a random stand-in IGL, and they were better than they had been before, because I think that they were able to stay fluid. I think that's where G2's strengths lie, like Sentinels, for example, where they're just super fluid, super optimal. They just play, very basic stuff, and they win by doing that. So bringing in somebody who's more prep focused, strategy focused, tactics focused, maybe it'll work, but I don't know if they fit.
Let's keep moving down the article though.
Well, I just wanted to. I just had one last note because we didn't really say anything about the Heretics roster rather. My big question is what happens with Artis, because he was, if not for the existence of MW0, he probably would have been our #1 player of 2020, and he's been. I mean, he's just been quiet this year. He's
been quiet. Yeah.
So I'm not gonna be dramatic and be like, this is Artis' last chance. But it does feel like he needs success here.
Yeah. Well, this entire Heretics team, though, you just don't know who's even going to be playing. Like, they don't know if Power's still going to be playing. So are they going to need a Sentinel replacement? What role does Artis even play? Does he go back to playing Duelist? Does he carry on playing, like, Silver Breach for the team? Apparently, he didn't enjoy playing Breach. Who the hell knows? There's just so many things that still need to be answered about that. Let's move down the article as well, because there was a bunch of other stuff that was going on. So Ascend is the team that Coldamenta was playing for, the team that won Masters 1 over in Europe. And this article was like earlier in the week, where they were saying that Starkso and Bone Cold and CNED were maybe trying out for different teams, looking at different projects. And the most recent report is that Ascend didn't want to sell any of their players, and so they've just gone for a straight up swap, Coldamenta and Zeke. So Ascend is now just exactly the same team, but with Zeke instead of Coldamenta. And Zeke is probably more. He is more talented than Coldamenta in terms of his rifling, I think. But he's not the same like prep guy, as far as I'm aware. The teams that he's called for have been very loose, and he didn't even IGL for G2. So this team is going to be dangerous, but probably not as overall good as they were in the past.
Yeah, I just tend to agree.
I think Zeke is slightly unproven still. I mean, he had some decent games with G2, the Red Bull thing. Like, he came out swinging with like a bunch of different agents and stuff like that. So I think he can fit anywhere. But in terms of like IGLing or anything like that, I don't think that they expect that of them. I think this is kind of weird for Ascend. Like, I don't think that they have a real plan, given the fact that this report says, Starso and Bone Cold are trying out for different teams, and CNET is also like gone. Apparently, like, he's looking at a new project. The rumor is that he's going back. What's that?
They're going to make a lot of. It looks like they're just trying to cash out.
But they're not.
Well,
That's
no,
what I'm
because
saying.
they're not trying to sell their team, their players.
They said after this report, there was another report that came out saying they're not going to sell those players. So even though they were looking for different options, Ascend didn't want to sell. They wanted to keep the same team, but with Zeke. So it is just going to be the same roster. There was more stuff about Alliance there, but they've just been chilling in like the tier 2 level. So they just. Cadaver left, and they were trialing somebody else recently, but I don't think that's a major move. Was there anything else in that article?
There was speculation about like OG.
Oh,
right. Well, NIP with JD.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty significant.
I don't know where JD's gone, because JD was cracked. JD was like playing on 70 ping, destroying everybody for NIP. But where's he gone? There's no other team that, like, where is he going? Heretics?
FPX?
Jesus. You're broiling FPX into this.
I saw. No, it's not pure speculation. Well, okay, so it is pure speculation, but I saw.
It's not your pure speculation.
I saw that the streets were talking.
Okay.
I was seeing people
in the streets.
Yeah, people have been discussing that JD off of NIP, but he was so good. Why would they? Surely a better team.
Better than NIP? Only a few.
Only a few.
Okay, all right.
I'm just
Crazy
saying. I've
speculation.
heard. It is, but that's.
Yeah.
It seems like it's not impossible.
No. And there's
Sorry,
another.
what
totally
are you
unfounded.
implying? Because I'm pretty sure I'm on the wavelength, but I don't know. The streets. What are you implying?
What are the
To
streets
Gambit?
whispering when you put your?
I'm saying I've seen people saying that.
The little Timmies that hang around people's streams and
No,
get
no, no.
juice.
Fucking say it, bro. What do you mean?
No, I've been seeing talks out there in the
I mean,
in the ecosystem.
He's just putting his ear to the street and listening to the movement, listening
Yeah,
to the
no,
ground movement.
I've
That's
been
what he's hearing.
seeing
It's whispers.
talks in the ecosystem about JD going to FPX.
You mean on like Reddit?
I will
Twitter,
say no
Twitch,
more.
where else?
I won't reveal my sources.
Okay.
Okay, all right. There's just absolute nonsense from.
All right, well,
No, I mean
we'll see what happens.
We'll see. They definitely could. Yeah, so we've already kind of discussed the G2 Ascend swap as well. Basically, shit's just going crazy in Europe right now, and we'll wait for it to settle. And we'll kind of, I guess, once the teams that announce their rosters, we'll go through them and say like whether we believe those were actually good changes to make. As for FPX, though, I really think that is the FPX one is an interesting discussion, and I know that you don't want to talk to them. Yeah, you said previously you don't want to talk about FPX. You've already broken.
Until they've made. I said I didn't want to talk about them until they've either broken the curse of choking or they're making moves.
Right. Okay. Well,
Like if they were just winning games with the same stuff, I don't care.
Well, they have made a change recently,
Yeah.
a coaching change. But more importantly than that, I think they need a trip to the doctor's office. I think it's very important that we assess the state of the pros on FPX. And so it's time for our next segment, probably a recurring segment, which is the pro state exam of FPX, where we're going to get real deep inside a team and we're going to try and figure out whether the four brains of the medical profession here can really get to grips with what's been troubling these teams. So first of all, if I'm to put my finger on it, what's the problem?
In it.
Yeah, not on it, in it.
Yes, if I'm to put my finger in it, what's the problem?
I mean, so the problem is they have a case of the choke.
Yep.
They just every time when they make it deep in an important tournament, it looks like they're en route to winning.
Airways blocked.
They've been called things like unbelievable. And they are. And then they fail when it matters most.
Yep. So if we're to look at this, where's the first place that you would begin? If you have a team, genuinely, if you have a team that's choking, how do you address that problem? I think it's one of the most difficult problems to actually address in a team scenario. And from the outside, it feels almost impossible to tell where that issue would stem from, what the problem is. Let's look at the symptoms first, I think. Is it their macro play? Is it their micro play? What ends up devolving? To me, it's a little bit of both, but the most obvious thing that happens is their micro, like the players not actually playing as quickly, playing as coordinatedly, and just hitting their shots in the same way that they seem to in normal games. Is that fair? Do you think?
Yeah. I think you will often see the players not hit the shots they typically would. I also think that when they get thrown a curveball in some of these games, like against Liquid, for example, with their comp on Haven, they struggle in the big games to adapt in real time against things like that in the big scenarios in a big game like that.
Yeah, I think if in scenarios where they have to play their opponent's game instead of their own game, they do tend to really flump out. I'm thinking again about like the bind matchup against Summon FC when it came to First Strike, when that was like the big choke where they lost 12-4 or something after battering them on the map previously. And it just felt like whiffs from individuals, not all the time, but just in some crucial moments. And then also a macro strategic inability to adapt their game. So for me, the first person to look at there is Angel, because he's providing leadership in game. He's providing that like IGLing adaptation too. if Angel was the cause of a problem, what, you fucking giggling at my glove?
What? This is a medical instrument.
It's a medical glove.
Nothing funny about it.
If Angel was the source of this problem, let's say theoretically, Angel is the reason that this team is choking in big games.
Sure.
To me, it doesn't make sense to say the solution, the diagnosis, Angel is the problem. The prescription can't be to surgically remove Angel from the team, because you also lose all of the great stuff that Angel provides. You're not the team. You aren't FBX at that point. You're just a random collection of players. Is that agreed as well, that you actually can't just straight up remove Angel if he is the problem?
No. That's he is, like, when I had doubts about whether WeDid is the soul of his team, Angel is FPX. Without Angel, there is no FPX in my mind. Very, very obviously. Yeah. So no, you can't do that. I would point to the inexperience of other players to help Angel with his burden, because it feels like he has so much on his shoulders. We haven't gotten a chance to talk to any of these guys or anything like that. And there haven't been serious interviews done, but I feel like there's a lot on Angel's shoulders. I feel like everybody else right now is not necessarily sure of how to help him, especially when it comes to big moments.
Sure.
Also having someone, I mean, when you check the charts, when you look at the brain waves and the sleep study here, I feel like they need someone to help ease, like you talked about, the burden for Angel, but also to help them all reevaluate maybe their macro game. Like, and when they get in situations where, like, if Angel's the one doing all these things, it's tough to be extremely flexible and a fragger and the IGL with how you approach the game in a macro sense. So they need someone potentially to help them to think about the game differently in terms of how they adapt, like mid-round and mid-game, because they're probably so reliant on, like, Angel sits in the lab cooking up something all night, and then they get into the match, and then when you come up against, like, a Gambit or some crazy strat, then they're like, oh man, like, what are we doing against this? We're just going to try to keep running what we've been running, but that's not going to work, right? So they need a second opinion. They need to go to a second practice, a second
thankfully
primary.
They have 4 opinions here.
Yeah, they need multiple opinions. They need someone else to help Angel figure out, like, what is going to be our adaptation, right? How are we going to think about the game differently than just, we're running this strat, this is like our comp, even though we swap our comps plenty of times. When they run into these walls of, like, these guys are playing differently than we played before, and we have, like, nerves popping up, they need someone to help them think about before the game's in it, like a coach, ideally, to be like, this is what we need to be thinking about, and how do we adapt.
I don't really think we should, like, I can't point to anything specific that in these games there is tactical, like, mistakes or anything like that. It feels like there's, stuff called, and then when they get to it, they forget to check a corner, they forget to look up for a camera, or somebody misses a shot. It's stuff like that. It's not like he's making massive blunders. I think maybe, like, one time you'll see, a complete miscall on a rotation or something like that.
Well, that's what I mean. Someone to help them think about, like, to refocus on their basics when stuff changes, right? It's not about the things they do right, it's about the things they do wrong. And the things they're doing wrong are, like, the basics that are missed because a variable's changing.
I think that doesn't come down to, like, the ideas or anything like that. It doesn't seem like there's FPX has never been a team that does not have a wealth of ideas, is my point, basically.
Yeah.
It is about somebody who can help everybody buy into the ideas as the adjustments come. Because Angel's experience, he knows how maybe he's had a history of choking throughout his entire career, but, like, he's still making calls and trying to make the right plays, making reads and all of that. That when you get into these situations in IGL, you go to overdrive, right? Maybe that's the problem, but also you have to have somebody else who's there to help everybody understand the ideas, help, them be like, yeah, this is the right idea, rather than he makes the call, nobody says anything, everybody's nervous, and then they go into it half-assed because they don't fully believe or they don't fully get the idea.
Yeah, I noticed that something that happened in their most recent tournament run, which I've noticed a little bit before too, is that Angel tries to take a lot on his own shoulders in terms of proactivity as well. Like, when they were playing in these games where, for example, against Team Liquid, when they realized that they needed to be more proactive and be more aggressive against Liquid and find timings, find opportunities to, like, entry and pushing to areas, it was a lot of Angel doing that. And that's partly because he had swapped his role over to being, like, the duelist player in a lot of these comps, but he was just trying to kind of force it himself. He was just trying to take sometimes unfavorable duels to brute force his way through scenarios instead of relying on his teammates to be able to create opportunities in the rest of the map. And that might be because Angel gets antsy and goes for that, or it might be because there's a bit of a lack of proactivity on the rest of the team when it gets to these big pressure scenarios. People don't want to step up and actually like do that kind of shit, which I could believe both avenues of that too. But to me, the solution, you can have a lot of conversations about the diagnosis, but whatever the diagnosis is, I don't want to see FPX make roster changes. I don't know whether this is a controversial point because you're talking about like them bringing in JD and stuff like that. I don't want to see any roster changes with FPX. They have a fantastic roster. I want to see them work on the hard shit. They've got all of their game down apart from the really tough shit when it gets difficult, where those kind of improvements need to come internally, I think. I'm thinking to like Astralis in CS, where there was that breakthrough where they're just able to figure out the mental portion of their game, and they were dominant after that for a large period of time. I feel like FPX is that kind of team that's waiting to be dominant, and it's not about making a roster move. It's about their players either gaining experience or getting their mentality fixed, whether that's a mental coaching or whether that's just them figuring it out themselves. And I think the coaching change that they've recently done might be a good thing as well, potentially. There's clearly some kind of change that needs to be made, and it's one of those situations where I trust the internal, the people on the inside to make better decisions than the people on the outside in terms of what the solution genuinely is.
Yeah, I definitely tend to agree. I don't want to see a roster move either. I mean, realistically, if you look at it, it's like, who would you want to take? There's no reason to change.
Who would you? If you brought in JD, who would you change? What do you even do?
I wouldn't want to change anyone. I really wouldn't. I think that, I tend to agree. I think it needs to come from the outside. I think it needs to come from coaching. I think it could be very beneficial for them that coaches are going to be more integrated into the game, having an additional voice that can step in if things are starting to look shaky or if players need a mental reset. And potentially, I mean, I know they have
Josh,
do you need a mental reset?
Got a piece of grit in my eye.
You okay?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Do you need to call an actual doctor? You okay?
Just why you got to put the glove on and go to work.
Yeah, get an invisible leather glove. I mean, I know FPX have a number of staff as well. Like, I know they have coaches, assistant coaches, analysts, water boy, masseuse on call.
I think they only had 2 coaches. I think they had Jonta and I think they had Doom Bros.
Doom Bros.
I thought they had. For some reason, I thought they had like 7.
They have
staff.
a general manager, Pekka, as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Pika? I'm not sure.
But they seem like a team that would benefit greatly from like a sports psychologist or someone in that field to help some of the younger players, I think specifically, feel more at ease in these pressure situations.
I think the coaching slot definitely could help, but I also wouldn't. I'm the opposite of you guys. I wouldn't mind a player change. Like, I'm not necessarily like fully sent on the idea, but when you reference Astralis, for example, there were slight player changes here and there. One person getting swapped out every once in a while until they finally found that team. You know, it wasn't like they completely didn't change anything.
What would you go for then, Balla?
Let's have that talk then.
Shao is somebody that I would think of as, somebody who, it's not that he's bad or anything like that. It's just like, we need somebody else to come in with some new attitude or opinion or something like that. Those minor things that a different player brings, a different look, a different voice, all that stuff really can make a difference. So I think maybe
Shadow
Shao,
kind of
maybe
pick up the
Demasic, maybe Zippon. I think that those guys are
yeah, see, I love
any of them, to be honest. It's not like one guy is the god, except for Angel on this team.
Yeah, and even Angel has his issues. It's just that he's impossible to replace, right? That's the thing. The other players, it is possible to replace them whilst keeping success high. I think that when I think about like the choking that happens in games, Zippon is definitely one of the players that I think of, but his peaks are so high and he's such a young player that I really would hate for them to give up on him. And I don't think it's deserved to give up on him either and try and just replace him with another crack duelist or whatever, because Zippon's been like, his peaks are phenomenal. He's been at his peak best duelist player in the region by a long shot, probably the best rifler in the world. he's also been able to demonstrate recently that he's not just the raise one trick, you know? He's been able to play the Sage for them as well, and I think he's played some other stuff too. I can't exactly remember. Oh, yeah, he played the Reyna, right, of course, because he got the 523 ACS Reyna game on Icebox. Literally the highest ACS anyone's ever gotten in a pro match, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
The guy is cracked, but, like, yeah.
You're right, though. There has been moments where it's like I remember the Ascend semifinal in Masters 1 where that I saw so many times. I'm just like, Zippon, no.
Yeah.
Like,
And also, yeah, I think Shao is one of the players where I think the proactivity in big games is probably, or at least could be an issue. Because he's another player that actually does seem to, I don't know, I guess get his when it comes to the big games. It's not like he chokes. He actually had some big moments in the most recent games.
Clutches.
But yeah, but
Says that in comms.
yeah,
Got mine.
I got mine.
Got mine.
But yeah, maybe a bit more proactivity is required in the way that Meadow was changed out for Dimasic, and there was definitely much more proactivity around the map from that change. Maybe that is a thing that might want to be addressed from Shadow or Shao. It's so...
Yeah, but nobody deserves to, you know, they all very good on this team. They all bring something at some point, you know, that is very, very tangible. Literally every single player on this team.
I think I'd want them to stay the same still. I think the Doom Bros, like, the swapping out of a coach here, because we don't know what their practice is like, is the thing. And we're dealing with a lot of inexperienced players. So to me, having a coach that changes, like, potentially how they practice, right? Because what if they're in a situation where, like, they're dominating scrims? Like, they look at, like, a very dominant team, and then they get to a match scenario where they start choking. And the situation there should just be, we need to be making sure to practice our fundamentals constantly in scrims, right? Like, even when we're up, even when we're playing against something different, we need to be checking these corners. We need to be playing, like, calm, cool, collected type of situation, because practice is what takes you over to the matches. Like, you're establishing good habits. Yeah. So I could be of the opinion that maybe FPX had, like, I don't know exactly how they practice, right? But there could be a situation that since they're always, like, very dominant for stretches, and then they kind of collapse towards the end, maybe they're not keeping good practices, the good practice habits. They're not keeping, like, very consistent, pretty much habits of, like, how are we dealing with the fundamentals, because we're winning all of our scrims, right? Like, obviously we don't know that from the inside out, but that's where I think a coaching change could make a difference for them, and being more integrated, like Wyatt talked about. Because if you have all the talent and you have not the results you want, but results, like, still very solid results, it's in that there is a foundation to build upon there. And it seems like you just need to fix fundamentals, because that's what the team is lacking. And that's where, like, a coach comes in more so than player changes.
Sure. Well, I think that was an extremely successful doctor's appointment. FPX, they entered the doctor's office. We failed to diagnose any of their problems. We offered no solutions. And our primary recommendation is, don't make any changes. So that to me is a successful pro state exam. I think that's extremely successful.
Looks good.
Yeah, I think they're just. The thing is, though, they might just be one breakthrough away. You know?
I think they are. Yeah.
They just need to break through the mental wall one time.
You know what you're sniffing there? That's copium. You're sniffing the FPX copium.
No, I don't think so.
No?
I think that's.
No, that's very reasonable.
That's like
not, it'd be very different
for
other teams, but FBX is reasonable to be of that opinion.
I like that we're luring.
When you go from, I don't want to talk about this team, I don't want to see them at all.
They made a change.
Yeah, just one break.
They made a change. That was all that he needed.
Yep.
He just needed one tiny coaching change, and he's like, yep, I'm back on board. I'm back on board the FBX train.
Bro's promoted.
Okay.
Top one.
Let's get into the meat of the podcast 1 hour in. We're going to talk about Brazil and Korea and the teams that actually made it over to Iceland. Let's start with Brazil. So it's Vikings, it's Sharks. If anybody hasn't had the opportunity yet to go and look at the backchat episode that we just published on Monday, please do. It was a really, really interesting look from Sadak and Sassy, who are the two players that speak the best English on Team Vikings. And they were kind of talking us through the Brazilian scene, how they've been able to stay a real tier ahead of the competition within this year. And their win in Masters 2, their win in Masters 1 and Challengers Finals now in Brazil. Didn't get a chance to speak to the Sharks guys, but yeah, let's kind of go through this. I want to start with Vikings. I want to kind of work our way from the top down. We'll probably only talk about the top 4 teams because there does seem to be a pretty significant tier break between the top 4 and the bottom 4. But let's start with Vikings. I want to know just straight off the top, how good do you think these guys are? After watching these games, after talking to the team, looking at the Brazilian scene, comparing them to others, I've done a pretty deep dive this week into Brazil, and I know that you guys have as well. How good do you really think this scene is compared to the rest in the world?
So
wants to go first? I'll go first. I mean,
I'll go first
personally, I think Vikings look. Well, since we're starting with Vikings, I think Vikings look really cracked mechanically. But honestly, when I was watching up their matches, they kind of did some running their head into the wall with certain executes a lot. Particularly if you watch the grand finals versus Sharks, their ascent, they kind of just ran the same execute on A like 20 times. And I was like, I think Vikings know their mechanics, and a lot of the looks, they look beyond Ascent, because I didn't, the rest of their maps, they looked amazing. And also, one good thing for Vikings here, they seem kind of ahead of the meta compared to a lot of the teams in Brazil, in that they're actually utilizing like Astra. And they're trying to like use agents that are kind of a mainstay now in Europe and North America. So I actually think Vikings are definitely a bit ahead of everyone in Brazil. Obviously, they just won, but even more so than just that. Like, this team, to me, looking at the international stage and where they're at, they look like the most prepared to compete and like even win.
Yeah, I mean, they're the most. They're definitely, in regards to personnel, they're the most well-rounded team in Brazil right now. I think every player on the team is excellent in their spot. Which, I mean, it's hard to find that in any region. So that's already a huge advantage for them going in. But they're also the most well-rounded in regards to their approach to the game and their game plan. It definitely did help them that they were playing a bit more Astra and Viper than the rest of the field. Probably could have even played more than they did, but perhaps they'll take us there by the time we get to Iceland. I suppose we'll see. I am really impressed, and I have very high hopes for them. I think that they should be making a really deep run, if not making the grand finals. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they could win either.
Yeah, I think that this it's really hard relationally to look at the different international stages and whatnot, but I agree with you guys. This seems like a team that has broken through the duelist heavy focus in Brazil. And it seems to me that the play style has fallen off of that, Brazil is so aggressive. Like, Vikings seems to be a team that breaks that mold more so than anybody else, where to me they seem like a mix for the NA guys. It feels like a mix between Sentinels and 100 Thieves almost. The way that some of the plays end up working out, the way that Stacey plays, to me is reminiscent of how Hiko plays, with a little bit more aggression, especially when his team is up in the business. But I think they can make a deep run. That is, even though we're all saying it, that still is kind of a hot take, because we literally have no clue. When you say they're deep, they are deep, because every other Brazilian team is top heavy in their duelists, right? Whereas here you have Sadhak, who could play the killjoy. He's the sentinel role. He plays Viper sometimes, and then you have Stacey, who's playing Sova, and Suitcase is what I'm going to call him.
I love saying Suitcase.
Is that not his name?
No,
right?
Definitely not. It's so wrong. It's so I'm a fucking K Kona Suitcase. It's just.
I legitimately thought that was supposed to be his name.
It's
so I'm
Sutekas.
Sutekas, yeah, Sutekas. But no, he's Suitcase.
Okay.
Like much deeper, and I honestly think that I don't know how to say this guy's name either. FRZ and GTN, these guys are not necessarily the best on the team. They're very, very good. They fill the role very well, but it feels like every single player has something to contribute. And I like the fact that they're not top heavy in their duelists compared to everybody else in Brazil.
Yeah, they are a well-rounded roster. I think FRZ's got some nasty aim, though, as well. Him playing much more Phoenix here, he feels, when you were watching Prime Drone, and it just felt like every time he had his ult, he had an aimbot, and he was running around and just boom, just straight on someone's head, boom, straight on someone else's head. That's what I feel like when I watch FRZ, where he's just, when he has ult, he's fearless in his entrying, and he has such incredible flick aim that he just opens up rounds for them with that.
You know what this team is actually like to me right now when I'm watching?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess very specifically as well, or rather more specifically, when they run the Raze Phoenix,
Yeah.
they feel like Envy, if Envy were just beyond their realized potential.
Really?
Yeah,
they do play similar comp actually,
And
because they play the Raze Phoenix pretty much everywhere.
and they play a very similar map control game on defense built around the Raze and Phoenix, often taking areas of the map, comboing utility together, playing off the whatever they have, the Omen on some maps, like if it's Ascent,
I
etc.
actually think that's a pretty good example, actually, yeah.
And I do have very high hopes for this team. I could see them. I could see them winning.
My bladder was about to burst, so
That's what I said when you
ran away. Did you say that you expected to see them in the grand finals?
I think they could absolutely be in the grand finals.
Because while I did originally think, like I've been saying for months at this point, that Brazil could really upset people in the first international tournament, I don't think I would predict these guys to be able to make it to the grand finals. I still think that.
I agree with you there, actually.
I still think that sometimes when I'm watching when I was watching like their map pool as well, their map pool is extremely good. They don't really have maps that they ban very often, or rather they don't have a perma-ban map, right? But the whole of the Brazilian team essentially doesn't play split, so that is just a big old question mark for me. The one time I did see Vikings play split was when Sassy was playing Sky, and it looked amazing. Like, they were so aggressive and proactive with it, and they just looked phenomenal. But that was what they've played split once this year, so that is not a large sample size by any means, and it seems like everyone just bans it within Brazil. So that is a complete unknown to me. Their bind, I don't think they're going to be able to beat either of the European teams, even though I think their bind is pretty good. I just don't think their attack side looks good enough to be able to pull it off. I think, going back to what Avast was talking about the kind of running their heads into a brick wall a little bit, I feel like they're definitely very good in their attacking halves, but it feels like some of their executes are... When I was watching them on Bind particularly, this exec that they do constantly on B, where they put down the Viper wall, every time they put down that Viper wall, they're going to be hitting B, and they're going to be hitting it in the same way, where they have the poison orb towards the back, and they push into the site. And I think these kind of tendencies are going to be easier for top European and Sentinels to read. And I think that's the only competition that they really have at the LAN, is the top EU teams and Sentinels. Like, I would expect them to beat everybody else.
Yep.
But I think it's still going to be a tough ask for them to make the grand finals. I think they'd have to be playing on their A game to be able to pull that off. Because, I still think that there's some readability in terms of how they're playing. But I definitely think they're a tier 1 team coming into Iceland.
Yeah. I think that the like executes and stuff like this, I wasn't really honestly paying too much attention to them because, like I said, it felt so much like when I watch Sentinels, I don't watch for their executes, right? They win sites because they get the picks early on, they get the advantage early on, they force rotates and stuff like that. They break all the utility. This to me seemed like Vikings was very much focused on that sort of thing as well. So when they have something that they do often, doesn't actually bother me because it's everything that leads up to that that's slightly better.
Sure. Yeah.
I do think I agree with the fact that, against the Liquids and the Fanatics, I just don't I don't think that they're ready. I don't think any teams are ready for that on Bind. Everywhere else,
I feel like Bind is just
okay.
I think their bind is just too good, the European teams right now. Because what they're playing here is a pretty... Oh, here's the other thing, though, that I really liked. The Astra play coming out from Vikings was very good on bind. And the European teams don't play Astra on bind. They play it with the Brim. And that has its own benefits. The smoke execs are very good. The molly's useful for both defense and their angles and for post plants. But what they were doing with their Astra utility on defense against Sharks was really powerful. And it's clear that they've put in a lot of work to combo it nicely with GTN. They were often trying to hold back Sharks from execing out of showers with the poison orb, and then they'd put down an Astra slow, and then then Sassy comes along and ults them as they exec, and then Sassy just gets a kill, 2 kills off the back of his ult, because they're forced to use that timing to exec. They can't wait out the Sova ult because they've already waited out so much extra utility from the Viper and the Astra. So I think that's a really nice quirk that is not really ahead or behind the meta compared to EU. It's just a different take on it, running the Astra in this comp.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I felt more confident in their play on their defensive halves mostly. I think that they play an excellent defense. I think they they play the map control game really well, but they also just have these blowout defensive rounds where they just all in on one part of the map
their
and just
defense,
the team.
Their ascent defense where they just run down mid is explosive.
Yeah,
it conditions you to be fearful as the attackers, I think. And that is really going to mess with some teams' heads.
Yeah, those are the type of plays that I don't see other teams doing. Those are the type of plays that other teams, even if they are prepared for them, they haven't. If they're prepared for them because they watched it, it's different than being prepared for it because you've actually played against it and experienced it, and will understand when they're going to go for that kind of play. I don't know. Where do you guys think they'll end up? I think that at the very least they should finish in the top 4, but I could see them, as I said, I could see them making the grand finals. I think that they have the depth and player skill to absolutely do it. I think that they have the depth in regards to their strategy. I think they have a nice approach to the game. I can see them going very far, but what do you guys think?
Top 4, I think, is a fair assessment. My one concern still is, like, personally, I actually had a slightly different opinion than you, Ball, on like their map control game early on offense. On defense, I agree. Like, they have their crazy defense aggression, but on offense, I feel like a lot of times the only reason they had any sort of advantage was because, like, especially versus like Sharks in the grand finals, Sharks would just kind of like take a really bad duel and like lose someone early.
Sipping on the seeding game juice of ass. You've been sipping on that.
Like, legitimately, like, Sharks are just like, any of their map control came from the fact that people just take a really bad duel against them a lot. And I didn't really feel like they would do things very often that would like lock down an area of the map and force them. They would oftentimes just like someone would just feed, and then they would just do a fast rotate or like another, or even on a sit, like they would just keep hitting the same execute over and over and over and over again on attack. On defense, they were way more proactive and like way more varied in their looks than their attacks. So that's the main thing I'm worried about for them, because I think they're ahead of the meta in Brazil. I think their players are all really good and they have like a deep roster compared to like the duelist heavy stuff for Brazil. It's just their attacks. I'm worried about their attacks because I don't see a universe where like any of like the European teams in particular, and even Sentinels, are just gonna like just take dry duels other than like Zoms and Haven and Sewers, where he'll just like peek over and over again.
I mean, you say
like,
that, but
I just don't see that.
If Tens is having one of those games, he does do that kind of stuff quite a lot.
But that could be feast or famine, right? Like,
well, that's the thing, and I think that's going to be pure famine. Just starving Tens against a team like this, because they, I mean, I think, what did Sadak say in the interview? Like, Tens is like a dime a dozen in Brazil or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, like, we have so many Tens in Brazil.
Yeah, like they're, I mean, Tens go, like Tens, Dirk dashing in, shit like that. It means nothing to them. Yeah,
I think
they've experienced worse. Like,
it's very interesting. Their win condition does seem to be shutting down aggression from other teams, and that is really interesting coming into Iceland, because we were expecting Brazil to be the region that was going to be the really aggressive region, and instead the meta in the last couple of months has evolved to be the top teams are the ones catching the aggression instead of doing it themselves. And the aggressive teams end up, like you're saying, Avast, looking like the ones that are making really dumb plays on defense, because they're just running out there and trying to take unfavorable duels, and they're getting gobbled up. I do think the Vikings have the individual skill across the board to absorb people like Yampi, Durka, Scream, Tens, that I think they do have the skill across the board to be able to deal with those players. Not saying they're going to neutralize them completely, but I think they've got what it takes to be able to go toe-to-toe and not get overwhelmed by players like that. I also want to point out that when they were playing in the winners final against Sharks and they beat them on Ascent, something they were doing extremely well was their like pump fakes on attack. where they run fast execs a couple of times and it works, and then they fake the fast exec to force out all of the defensive utility from Sharks, and then they just stop. They just pump the brakes and they just wait right outside the doorway, and then they go back and they collect all of the people that have over-rotated, and they just get the kills behind them from people that have already extended out from A. Like, I'm imagining there was a round where they've been running fast mid to B hits against Sharks. They've worked a couple of times, and then they run a round that looks identical. They run the same utility, and they stop just outside market and just outside B main, and they pause. All of the Sharks use all of their defensive utility, and then Vikings just walk back and kill a guy that's extended out of catwalk. I think those kind of pushes, it's really only like tier 1 teams that are finding the balance in tempo to run those kind of plays and run them effectively. And I want to see more of that from Vikings, because I don't think that I saw that very much on Bind, for example, although Bind isn't really a map where you see defenders rotating behind you a lot. Normally they're just rotating through their own spawn. So it's not as effective, but still, like, not very much teleporter use on their attacks. But there is still evidence of them being excellent in those kind of scenarios. It might be this round, actually, that we're showcasing here, where they're doing this fast hit, using the boombot to be able to clear out. They forced the dash out of Gabishis, and they go towards, and they force out the Killjoy utility, the Raise Nade, the Recon Dart, the drone, all of these things, and they've drawn 3 players over to B, and then they just wrap back and they're able to collect the kill. I think that control of tempo, to me, was a good sign for Vikings, that they're able to manipulate their opponents, and they're not just zug, 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 zug on their attack rounds all the time, even though they are quite execute heavy at some moments.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was. You know, they have a massive depth of tempo. They can go fast. They can go middle. They could switch sites. They could go all the way to the end of the clock. I don't think any other team has even that depth. Even Sentinels, for example. Sentinels doesn't have a fast type of play for the most part. Like, they hit Shark with the Shark attack down mid on CT. Like, they got everything in terms of pace and tempo, which I think is very, very, very scary, especially if they know how to control it and use it at the perfect times, which against Brazil, it looked like they did, you know?
Yeah, and it's about getting the read on their opponents, I think. All right, let's move on and talk about Sharks, though, because there does seem to be a big tier difference between Vikings and the rest of Brazil at the moment. I don't even know what their overall record is for the whole year, but Vikings are 16-1 on Bind, 13-1 on Ascent, 12-4 on Haven, and 6-2 on Icebox. So for the whole of 2021, they've only dropped they've only dropped 8 games, 8 maps across the whole of 2021. They are clearly in a tier of their own right now. They won Masters 1. They've won now Challengers Finals for Masters 2. This is quite evidently the best team. And yeah, when we asked the Vikings guys if they were surprised that Sharks made it, they said, no, we expected it to happen. But from the outside, it did feel like it was a pretty open field for number 2.
It always feels open with the outrageous skill level within the top level teams. But watching the games and seeing how it played out, it does make sense. And it does make sense why they would feel that way. Because Sharks did just have... They were the other team with the best idea as to how to play against the majority of the Brazilian teams. And crucially, like, the way that Gamelanders and Furia play versus the way that Sharks and Vikings play.
Yeah.
Sharks and Vikings are directly... They have directly countered those teams as to how they approach the game and win games. And that is what got Sharks through in my mind as well. I mean, I think that really is the key. And then just when they go up against Vikings, though, I really do believe right now Vikings, in all aspects of the game, they are just great right now. Sharks just don't have the same depth as Vikings at the moment.
I mean, Sharks' map pool, if you want to talk about depth, is already my biggest question for them going in. Because there's something like 60... Well, actually, I've got the stats right here. Why am I trying to remember it off the top of my head? There's 17-2 on Haven this year, so that's clearly their best map. They have a fantastic record on it, although Vikings beat them most recently. But their Ascent is 15-5, also good. Their Bind, they have a 50% win rate on, even though they're playing Viper and stuff on that map. So they're kind of trying to play the meta, but they're still even this year on it. Their Icebox is 30%. So they are They're definitely not, and they're just permaban split. So they only have 2 maps that they're actually good at. When it comes to the top level of play, Sharks only seem like they're really able to win on Haven and Ascent. That doesn't seem like a strategy for success against the best teams in the world at Iceland.
Also, it seems like a lot of their round wins like rely on pros and just popping the fuck off like for a round. Like I've saw like especially during like their rounds versus Vikings, I would see them kind of be pretty like they weren't having good tempo. They were trying to rotate. Their rotates weren't great, and then the pros would just like pop the fuck off and get like 3 kills randomly or an ace, and then they'd be like, okay, we won the round, even though like we kind of just weren't able to hold the site at all. So and honestly, Gabish, I think that's like or Gabshish, it's like an S for the X. Like, you know, despite them playing duelist a lot, I actually like their look a lot better on non-duelist, which is kind of strange because you would expect like Brazil duelist to be like that's like their thing. But I don't know. I just Sharks felt like there was a pretty big gap between them and Vikings, like in terms of how well rounded they are and like what their actual tempo and like strats are. Like overall, I feel like Vikings is like they're the team to get it done for Brazil at Iceland for sure.
Yeah, I felt like Sharks was kind of one-dimensional, in the fact not necessarily their game plan, their approach, but in the fact that when they were losing, it was always only one person making a big impact, and that was either Gabish or whoever else. I think when they did come through, it was finally 2 players coming in at the same time, which was their duelist, Prozen, and whoever else the other guy is, which kind of sucked. I was honestly, when watching the Furia game, which was the one that qualified them for Iceland, I felt like Furia was the better team. I honestly felt like Furia
It did
should
feel like
have
Furia
won.
choked, didn't it, in that game?
Yeah, well, especially on Icebox, but overall, like, what was it? The first map was Bind. Furia just looked absolutely better. Ascent, like they somehow just lost they got stomped, and then Icebox they were up 8-0.
Yeah,
and they lost. Absolutely crazy. So yeah, they just couldn't deal with the pace of Sharks on their retakes on Ascent, and they got boomed that way, I feel like. But overall, I thought the approach was better. I thought that the players were all kind of stepping up all together at the same time. Like Zand was really good in that game. Khalil as well. Quick was massive. QCK, I think he used to go by.
Yeah.
So yeah, just I don't necessarily know if Sharks has what it takes to be against such a wide pool of different play styles, but I do think that they could cause some upsets. That's where I have them as my like Iceland standings. I think they'll cause upsets, but they won't be able to go to the distance.
Who would they upset? Because I mean, I think I would rank them probably. Honestly, I think I'd rank them a little below version 1 right now, but I don't think them beating NUTURN or the Crazy Raccoons or X10.
I think they can upset the EU guys.
Oh, you think they might be able to upset
Really?
the European teams? Okay.
My hot take alert's going off.
Why do you think that? Do you think there's some specific matchup that's beneficial to Sharks there?
I think that EU historically and even these teams, Fnatic and Liquid, have struggled against some of the teams who are one-dimensional, who have some weird quirk in the comp. I don't think that Sharks had too much of that. Well, actually, it might catch them off guard because of the way that they're just like consistently playing Omen, which isn't really a thing anymore when they played like double whatever. But generally, it's always these quirky teams that have very aggressive stints and have whatever read that they have, and they just go for it. I think that can catch the EU teams off guard. I don't think the NA teams actually feel like they'll get caught off guard in that respect.
Yeah, I kind of
No,
yeah. I do agree that the NA teams seem to be because they're so open with how they play, they do seem to be quite adaptable to their opponents. Whereas when I watch the European teams play, they try and play their game and they're trying to adapt their game to fit their opponent. But for the Brazilian teams that have made it through, I feel like it's somewhat similar with them too. I don't really feel like the Brazilian teams that have made it through are the most like the most flexible teams in the world that are always going to try and counterplay their opponents. They have a plan and a strategy of what they want to achieve in their games as well. And it's not like we've got Furia or Gamelanders with these incredible heavy hitters in that might just storm over the EU teams with their aggression. So I don't see the upset potential being there as much, personally. Like, if Furia had made it through, I actually think that Furia might have been more of a team that could have made upsets. Because they have such a different style.
Yeah, but I think this meta is just terrible for those teams.
Yeah.
I think this meta is just bad for Gamelanders and it's bad for Furia. And it's so hard for them to find success within it.
Sure.
I think they would have just struggled off the back of that, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
very reasonable.
Especially against a team like Version 1 who are all in on Astra Viper.
Yeah.
I mean, you could even, if we want to talk about Gamelanders a bit or Furia.
Sure, yeah.
I think maybe Gamelanders specifically because, they're expected to make it. They have who is still probably the best player in the world on their team.
Yeah.
Kurt, if you want to go to that Gamelanders Haven Liberty game, the one that they lost, I think you could pull up. It was either the last round or the second last one of Haven. It's a perfect example as to the struggles they felt, which is just Astra just ruining them. They're just, okay, we're going to try and fast hit this site again. Like John is playing Phoenix. He's trying to ult in one gravity well. Everything's over. All the rotations are already there. I mean, Astra and Viper are just so punishing to teams that want to fast hit sites.
Yeah.
Because if they're hitting the site where one is, or if you have both, if you're set up on different either site, like what can you realistically do? Not much. You just you can't get past the gravity well. If you go through the smoke, you're taking 50. It's just a bad meta for these teams. And they didn't change their approach, and it cost them.
Technically, it will be 30 at Iceland. It's still it's enough. It's going to be enough to where, I think the only team that actually, Sharks look a little bit more well adjusted, but when you saw just how behind the meta I feel Sharks still are, it just feels like Vikings are the only one right now that have a really good read on
Did Sharks play any of the major players who were playing Viper or Astra?
They were playing Viper.
They played Viper with Gabs.
No, I know they played Viper. They played Viper on Binds. I'm wondering if they played against any of the big Brazilian teams that were running. Did they play against Haven Liberty, who played Astra twice?
Yeah, and they played against Vikings, who were running it.
Yeah, they played against Viking, who was playing Astra and stuff, and Viper a bit. So
yeah, but
I'd have to rewatch and look at that specific interaction because
I think the Astra is the more important one, more so than even the Viper, especially with the nerfs. Still, Viper's going to be really strong still, but the Astra is so good at setting it up.
So you got the two mollies to throw down, but yes, it is the Astra primarily. It is the gravity well. There's just nothing you can do about a gravity well and a choke, especially on C long, for example. But yeah, I just think this was the worst meta for these teams. I don't think they adapted to the meta. They just tried to play their same game. In some respect, I feel like they kind of went backwards. Gamelanders on a lot of the maps went back to the old reliable Brazilian comp of the Reina Rays. That's the OG comp that in Brazil they were all the teams at some point, it felt like, were running that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just, it can't work right now.
I also, Gamelanders, when I was watching their games, I feel like they have not just regressed in terms of not following up with the meta, but their team play is just not good right now. Compared to looking at the other teams and other regions, we talk a lot about the way that this team is set up, and you can hear Sassy and Sadai talk about it in our interview as well, as being MW and John, and then 3 supportive players that are trying to put them in the best positions to frag. A lot of the time, they're not even doing that right now. They're not doing that. They don't have the team play to actually set up their duelists for success. It's MW and John doing their own shit. And if anything, it's John that's setting up MW, because John is entering and MW's cleaning up the players behind him and then just popping off individually. I mean, the round that we're watching right now, MW's just on his own inside A.
This round.
But there are many other examples of this happening, and they are playing an extraordinarily individualistic style, which doesn't... I mean, this is not the meta to be doing that kind of thing. This is the meta about team play and about using coordinated attacks to be able to open up space for yourselves to get through those choke points. You can't just brute force everything, and that's what it feels like Gamelanders are doing. Besides which, if you're trying to play an individual style, you simply can't do that with 3 players who are towards the bottom half of every tournament statistically that they've ever played in. Like, Joe has the worst stats in this tournament out of any player that's in it, and he's playing for a team that was expected to go deep. You can't do that unless you have fantastic team play, and they don't have good team play right now. So instead it actually feels like watching this game that it's just MW John and 3 people who are just running around just doing their own shit and not getting value out of it. They're all just playing on their own, playing their own game, and it's just whoever can frag, which is MW and John. There's no thought about how to put them in the best positions or what the game plan is. And when they're on defense, if those guys are holding the site, like Zhao and Yang, you just lost that site if they hit it. They just don't have the skill to be able to hold up.
Yeah. I was so underwhelmed by Gamelanders after all the hype. I watched them a little bit in the Masters run, but this was the first time I deep dive and watched them the entire way, and I was just underwhelmed. It felt like you guys are saying, the 2 guys, it felt like FaZe a little bit, back in the heydays. I don't know how many times I saw MW's era by himself, not making the right decision either. He's there and he tries to completely take over the round rather than that Haven round that we just saw. He lurks on to site, gets past the tripwires and stuff like that. They have no clue he's there. He calls the rotation and then he throws nades and dies. And I'm like, what is going on? And that forces them to go back. The individual decisions, even though they're fantastic individual players, just doesn't feel like they're actually working with the team.
That's a team where I feel like they're going to have to make roster moves. I think that their expectations are that they want to be the best. And I think they're actually really tight with each other as well, so that might make roster moves really difficult because I think they're longtime friends from other games.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, this was the final.
Just John they're just desperately trying to get in. They have to wait out all this util.
And it also, this is a pistol round for Haven Liberty too. And they're just sitting here stuck in long, unable to get out for the longest time. They have to rotate back to spawn, but they've already lost a player and given up a gun.
I can't remember if this was the last round or not, but I know towards the end of this game they kept going C long as well. It was driving me crazy. They were trying to 5-hit out a long with Phoenix running in. They just couldn't get in.
And those kind of burst plays were viable in previous metas.
This is the last.
Yeah, they were.
That star ruins them again.
Yeah, it's just the Astra. The Astra just ruins this style.
But it's also because they're really readable in how they're moving around the map, right? Yeah. They hit C and then they all just stomp their way over to A and they try and hit A. Yeah. And you can't. When you're playing against an Astra, you can't do stuff like that because the Astra can stop you from being able to get through, even if she isn't in position herself to do that with a rifle or like an Omen would have to be close to use a paranoia or something. Yeah, it really feels like they're just lost in being way behind the times. But I'm a little disappointed that Furia didn't make it, and Gamelanders as well, because that aggression was part of what I always associated with the Brazilian style. And I don't know whether Sharks are an adequate enough replacement to be able to actually represent Brazil extraordinarily well on the world stage.
I know what you're saying, but I think it might be for the best in regards to the actual results that the teams get in Iceland and representing the country, because those teams are just not going to do well in this meta.
But what I know what you're saying is that I wish we had been able to see a meta that was more open to that style as well. Where you could also play aggressively, and then we also got to see some hyper-aggressive teams along with the others too.
Absolutely.
It's really cool to be able to get that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And that's what people were looking forward to with all the Gamelanders hype and all that. It was the Brazilians play double duelists and they go crazy, that's what people were looking forward to. And we definitely, I don't think we'll get that. Sharks will do it a little bit. Vikings will also do it a little bit, but it's not even close to the level. And even if it wasn't this meta though, I think that style is dead, to be honest.
Really? You think that style's just donezo? We're not going back to double duelist aggression? I think it will return at some point.
Yeah, no, I think it's dead. I think it should be dead.
All right, Balla's calling it.
I agree with Balla. I don't see how it can
You don't ever see a world in which just burst plays come back. I think the meta is going to cycle. I think that aggressive play is going to come back at some point.
It's not that there won't be aggressive play. It's that specific style where it's like you're basically I mean, if Balla and I are on the same wavelength here, we're essentially referring to you are on one gear, which is aggression.
Right.
It's not mixing in aggressive. It's you are an aggressive team. You're playing these fast hit rounds.
The two guys who are trying to take space.
Yeah. I don't see a world where that can continue with the agents that are in the game now, and with.
But that doesn't mean they're always going to get picked.
I don't even think it's the agents in the game. I think it's just the most optimal way to play is a counter to that. Like no matter whether you have Astra or whatever, like I just think that the way that you play like Sentinels or something like that, slow, defaulty, controlled, playing for the information and working off of stuff, just is better than that. Like making decisions on the fly, being able to be fluid and retake sites and whatnot. I think that's how you beat that kind of stuff, and throw in like all these pace changes and whatnot. Sure. That's how it counters it.
There's going to be an evolution of the game.
I mean, I feel like it depends on what Brazil takes away from Iceland, essentially. Like, does Brazil walk away from Iceland and they're like, guys, we need to adapt? Or does Brazil walk away from Iceland like, guys, we need to frag harder? Like, so like it really just depends on what Brazil themselves, like what these regions take away from Iceland, right?
I think one question I think that that will matter, but Iceland's not a foregone conclusion. I think that us writing off the Brazilian teams because the meta is not favoring them. I think that it's not like they ignoring the meta. I think they must have made a conscious decision not to be playing those because of the way that other stuff has evolved in Brazil. What if they've already played against the Astra Vipers and they just decided it's ass? I think that is a very big possibility. Like why are they still playing Omen? There must be a reason on Ascent instead of Astra. There must be a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we don't see.
Yeah, I think that I think they're still being able to find value out of it because the counter paranoia is very good for being able to stall a push. It's in a similar way, but it's faster. Like I think that that's some of it is that the pace when you're dealing with such aggressive teams on attack, like a lot of the Brazilian teams are, you need to be able to react extremely quickly. And if you're not at that level with Astra, it's always going to be faster with Omen to just press Q, fire out the paranoia as some piece of defensive counter utility that stops an aggressive push in its tracks. Rather than trying to play an RTS, put down the slow, find the exact timing for it, etc. So yeah, I mean, also teams are using a lot of mobility agents in Brazil too. The Jett, the Rays that can get past those and end up getting not getting caught in the gravity well, whereas the paranoia is going to hit everybody. So I think there's I think
the pace thing region makes a lot of sense to me, but every other region is also running the double mobility agents as well. I want to
Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say they're still running Astra. They're still running the stall agents and stuff like that too.
I want to close out this segment by just asking very, very quickly, if you had to rank the regions right now, where would you put Brazil? Where are the top two Brazilian teams when it comes to ranking them? With EU, NA, Brazil, Korea, are they first, second, third? What's your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I will say I think it's pretty evident that there are three top regions, which are NA, EU, and Brazil. Where you go from there is open to interpretation, and I don't think it's particularly easy to give the edge to really hard give 1, 2, 3. Without watching them play, but we can speculate.
Yeah.
I want to say maybe 1 EU, 2 Brazil, 3 NA, but like by some slim margining.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I might be wild enough to. I mean, I think Vikings.
That's kind of wild.
I think Vikings are real good, but I'll go with that for now.
Okay, I like that. Has anyone got a different take?
I mean,
yeah, I think that this is a rock paper scissors situation. Like, I genuinely, I think overall, I would I think I would put NA above Brazil overall.
Right.
But I think that some of the stuff, I'm still full on with the upset potential for Shark against EU, for example. And I think Vikings can go toe to toe. but I do think that both Sentinels and V1 will be better against the Brazilians, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Wait, sorry. So were you saying the regions overall or just the teams that are at Iceland? Because I was thinking about just the teams that were at Iceland.
Yeah, just the ones that are at
Yeah, I was
Iceland.
thinking of
Okay, because if it was regions overall, my opinion would be different.
Sure,
But
yeah,
teams that are at
yeah.
Iceland, okay, I'm sticking with.
Yeah. Avast, what are you aligned with Balla?
Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with Ball a bit. I mean, I think Vikings is like really good, but I'm just not confident with Sharks. I'm just not confident with Sharks in terms of my read for Brazil. So like I would have probably, it's so tough with Europe and North America right now because I feel like NA's grasp of the meta is like pretty good currently. Like version 1 seemed like built to play right now in this meta. But I think I'll probably still go EU and A Brazil with the caveat that I think Vikings could just like hard pop off. I think Vikings is the team from like an outside those regions that could go far. Like they could definitely go far. I am not confident on Sharks though.
Yeah.
Also, yet to see LATAM.
Yes.
By the
Also,
way,
yet
we
to see
can
LATAM.
throw in if we just want to say South America.
Sure,
But,
because
we'll have
so
to
maybe
see how good Crew or Infinity.
Yeah, because the Sassy and Sadak were really bigging up Crew, but we don't really know how much the Scrimbucks are involved, which.
Bullshit Scrimbuck.
So yeah, we'll see about that. But for me, I think a lot of our discussion about the like errors that creep into the Brazilian game, I feel like it's very easy to forget the errors that have been plaguing Sentinels recently as well, the top North American team, right? Like I don't think any of us would have completely perfect glowing reviews of Sentinels' recent results with their run through challenges. And okay, they really did pick it up towards the end of Challengers Finals, and they looked like the real deal. And when you have so much history of them being a fantastic team, it's very easy to excuse away the mistakes that you do see. But I really do feel like NA has some serious holes that they need to patch up before Iceland as well, Sentinels included. That I just
Sentinels.
I just do have faith that Sentinels are going to do that. So like, I think I still would rank EUNA Brazil, but that's under the assumption that Sentinels do bring their absolute A game to Iceland, which I don't think is a guarantee. Whereas I think Vikings are just going to be Vikings. They're just going to be good. Like it doesn't seem like they start slow in tournaments or have really poor off days or anything like that from the games that I've seen of them playing in 2021. They're just good. Like everything they're bringing is good. They've played it on stage before. They were good. They've won stuff. They're good. Whereas Sentinels, it does really seem to be like they had some times where they were fucking bad. Like they need that time period to, I don't know, warm up, get good, figure out the meta. I don't know what it exactly is.
I think a lot depends on the format for Sentinels, man. I really like. If they get some time in groups, for example, I think it'll be good.
Well, they do have 7 days. The format has got to give them some time.
I'm not saying like the time before the format. I'm saying what the format actually is.
No, I mean the entire tournament runs over the course of 7 days. It would be ridiculous to have a format where the NA team went out within the first one day.
What I will
like that would be ridiculous.
On that though as well, I mean it depends too. Like what teams, like what's their run through like this hypothetical group? Do they play like X10, NUTURN, and then oh shit, we're playing Fnatic? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that is because we've seen even in some of these tournaments, like they will be pretty lazy about their play and just step on some lower tier NA teams, and then they play like a mid team in NA, and they are suddenly struggling, and the fundamentals are out the window, and no one can trade for each other, no one's watching angles. So, I mean, what are they going to, like, are they just going to beat X10 and with ease because they're not the best, and then they just play against a sick team and get smashed?
Yeah,
and then there's not even like a, I don't know. The thing I'm getting at is just that the skill level in this tournament seems outrageously varied.
Well, let's get on to Korea then. Let's move on to Korea because the other regions we're not going to talk about too much yet. But sorry, Balla, do you want a final point?
I think the best way to evaluate like how our estimations go for the rank, like how we rank the regions versus what we talk about after is like the average placement of it. Just because like a Vikings win, even though like Sharks does terrible, like that could switch things up. Everybody's gonna be like Vikings won, so Brazil's the best. But in reality, like I think the average placement of all the teams from the region is gonna be like a really good way to evaluate it.
And I do think that Vikings is a clear tier gap above Sharks in a similar way that Sentinels is a tier gap above version 1. That tier gap doesn't exist with EU, so they're more likely to win based on like average placement, if you want to put it like that, because they just have two better teams that they're sending.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Whereas NA hopes are with Sentinels. If you're trying to see NA winning Iceland, your hopes are with Sentinels. If you're trying to see Brazil win Iceland, your hopes are with Vikings. If you're trying to see Korea win Iceland, your hopes are only with one team, because there's only one team being sent. It's NUTURN. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about their
hopes are unfounded. If your hopes are with Korea, I salute you. But,
right. Well, let's start there with the uncomfortable truth, I think, is that there has been so much hype surrounding Vision Strikers and Korea, because Korea is phenomenal in the esports that it actually plays a lot of. League of Legends, Overwatch being the two that spring to mind, but also like StarCraft, obviously, and other things that they've really gotten culturally involved with in the past. Valorant does not seem to be that right now. There isn't that much depth within the Korean scene. They don't look as hot. I want to kind of go backwards compared to what we did in Brazil and almost start with setting expectations. From what you've watched of Korea right now, what's your thoughts? Like, do they belong in the group of like tier 1 competition?
Nope. Hard nope.
Well, what is what are we saying tier 1
I mean,
is
we're
like?
all banking on Vision Strikers making it, right, for the narrative. Like, that was we were all just like, Vision Strikers, just don't lose. Just don't lose before Iceland. And then it turned up that they lost, and like, because the thing, I didn't want Vision Strikers to lose, not only for the narrative, but also because I was not feeling confident about Korea as a region, like currently. And so it would make more sense to me to send Vision Strikers, even if they're not that good, because at least it's Vision Strikers. But now we don't have Vision Strikers, and I'm just not. I personally, like, I have to give Korea some credit, and I feel like they've tried to, at least NUTURN in particular, and even Damwon and stuff, like, they've tried to like stick with the meta a bit more than, like, let's say Brazil, but they just still don't look good at it, is my particular view on it. Right. Well, I'm not big enough.
Yeah, how I would assess tier 1, the teams that I'm thinking about as being tier 1 right now when it comes to Iceland, Liquid, Fnatic, Sentinels, Vikings. Those are the teams that I'm thinking of being tier 1. Tier 2, I'm thinking of like Sharks version 1. And then it's open to kind of other teams being added into that. Where do you think that a team like NUTURN stacks up, or the Korean top teams in general?
I honestly, I wanted Vision Strikers to go for the sake of the story, but NUTURN are just clearly the best team right now in Korea. And I think, within this game against Vision Strikers, they, especially on an individual basis, I think, just have better players right now. So I am glad that they are going, and they look to be the best team right now, right? But I don't think it's... I think you could put them maybe at the bottom of that tier 2. I don't think that's crazy, honestly. I think they have some good individual skill. I think Lakia's crazy. I think Wow is really crazy. They have so they have some pretty good fragging. I think on Ascent, they were both Vision Strikers and them on Ascent actually were. They just kept running the same rounds over and over and over. Vision Strikers had like on the Vision Strikers pistol, I was like, oh, that's cool. They have like this interesting execute where they were going through heaven to hit A, pushing through grass. They would use the Astra smokes to get through into heaven, and then they did it like 3 more times. The other rounds they would do the same B split over and over. Yeah. And NUTURN were holding the sites in the same way over and over. On Bind, NUTURN had a bit more depth. They were doing some interesting things on defense.
Yes.
Throwing in some cool defensive aggression.
Bind is definitely the best
They had
map.
the breach go through the teleporter and ult behind the players and shower.
That was a really
I don't know if you
round.
could find that, Kurt. Sorry, let me just throw it around. You can find it. Have fun. But it was a cool round. I'm sure someone probably clipped it. But they did have some cool shit on Bind. That's where their depth was. I think they're a pretty good team. I think they have some good individuals. I think they have some pretty good ideas. I think it's a question for me, how many maps can they actually do that on? And also, I think in Korea, they got away with a lot on defense because the attacking teams were not particularly coordinated, and their site anchors would just rack up 3Ks on way too many rounds. From just people not clearing things or just silly little mistakes like a timing being off, and Lackey he's just shooting them. They're coming in one at a time, and he's just getting kills over and over and over, headshotting everyone. And they're not going to have situations like that against the tier 1 competition, but I think they're a pretty good team.
Balla, what's your thoughts?
I think that the Korean region is very much all they're in their own galaxy, right? Where everybody plays, they all have the same issues. I'll put it that way, where the pacing is always the same. You just walk up to the space that is given and you execute from there.
Yeah,
so that's Vision Striker's issue every single time. I think that NUTURN is the only team that has actually evolved past that. I think NUTURN is literally the only evolution in Korea since the days of Vision Strikers dominating, where they are taking map control. Like on Ascent, for example, against Vision Strikers, and actually on both their games, they're taking this aggressive B main control with Solo trying to place Killjoy or Nanoswarms deep in B main, and then he has the other one in Market. Like they're doing stuff like that. Bathroom control was a thing that they were fighting off of. They were transitioning between 2 different parts of the map to take control. But still, I just don't feel like they have the experience against some of the other stuff that is going on.
Would you agree with Wyatt's classification of them being at the bottom level of that tier 2 with teams like Version 1 and Sharks? Are they on the same level as those teams?
Sure. Yeah. No, they're not on the same level as Version 1 or Sharks. That's why I like when you put them at the bottom of the tier 2, I'm like, yeah, okay, they are worse than those guys, but I wouldn't put them in the same tier.
Right, it's almost to me, a tier below. Right.
I would put them top tier 3. Like, I don't expect them to be consistently good against any of the teams above them. I do think that they could upset. I'm trying to think of a team that they'll be able to upset with their execute heavy style, and I think it's going to be one of the NA teams more than anything else, where they give them a lot of room and they just allow them to go crazy with their breach XX and stuff like that. I think that NA might struggle with that, where they follow through all the way into the site. That the problem might be their potential.
Version 1 are always going to ban Bind.
They should be consistently better than every other region.
They're never going to play Bind against Version 1, and Bind is easily their best map. NUTURN is the team that created this composition that FaZe started playing on Bind and on Ascent as well, where they were playing, it's like the 0 Sentinel, Breach, Sova, double duelist, and then the
but they played it differently. Like
they do. NUTURN, I think, play it more intelligently than FaZe do, where they're much more active on defense. They're very aggressive on defense. They'll get in your face. I think that could be pretty good, actually, even against the European teams. I just don't think that they have, like, the style, I think, would be pretty good against the EU teams. I just don't think they're going to actually be able to execute it properly.
I cannot imagine the EU teams giving them the space to get into the places that they need to be to get those executes off.
On attack? No way.
Right.
No, what I'm saying is
that's
they
why
might get caught off a bit on
any
defense.
potential against the EU teams.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think that it becomes very difficult to consider which teams might get upset by NUTURN. Sharks is a team that I'm thinking potentially as well. I'm just trying to think of teams that are going to let Bind into the map pool, because I think Bind is an absolute necessity. The thing is, though, Fnatic isn't actually going to get upset on Bind. There's no fucking way.
That's the problem. They're going to play Liquid. Who wants to play Bind?
I'm clipping that
Fnatic
shit.
Have fun on it.
That shit.
Yeah, every time we've made a hot take, like, no way this happens, it's happened every time. We did it with Andbox. We've done it with Version 1. Now we're going to go to Bind for Fnatic.
I think NUTURN have some upset potential on maps. I don't think that.
I don't think they can string it together across a whole series.
Yeah, though. I don't see 2 maps that they can necessarily win.
Here's maybe a little hot take, though.
Okay, let it rip.
Okay, if Sentinels are playing like dog shit at the beginning of the group stages, I can see them being a team that would get defeated by NUTURN, though.
Sure.
Because Sentinels, when they were dog shit, they did exactly what would be awful against NUTURN.
Yes.
Exactly
like
what
taking
would be
individual
they
stuff,
had no map
not
control
setting
at
up.
all, and they just let NUTURN execute potentially if they did that same mistake.
And recently they've been permabanning Ascent from the map pool, and they've been letting like Bind and Split through. I think Sentinel splits looked real shaky recently, and NUTURN at least have some good ideas of what they want to do. Like, they still pressure a ramp effectively. They take mid. They have some decent execs once they hit the site. Like, it's not great. I'm not trying to sell, like, NUTURN are going to take down Sentinels. They're going to dominate. But they still do have upset potential on certain maps. And if you're a team that's going to let, like, Bind and Split, for example, into the pool, or Bind and Ascent into the pool, then you have to be cautious of what NUTURN is going to bring, because they still are an all-right team that has decent individual talent, and some pretty decent coordination, and they're a step above the other Korean teams when it comes to their attack rounds as well. The rest of the Korean teams, and also the rest of the Asian teams from what I've watched, including the whole of not the whole of Japan, because I've only watched the top 2 teams, but the top 2 teams in Japan and X10 from SEA, their attacking rounds are so one-dimensional. They literally, if they take any map control, they're execing within the next 10 seconds. They're so readable. There's no sense of taking map control and playing the information game or playing slowly at all. It's just, we take showers, we push out of showers. We take hookah, we push out of hookah. And there's nothing else to their game when it comes to attack. It's so easily readable. At least NUTURN don't do that all the time.
Yes.
You know? At least they've got that extra tier to their play where they're definitely the best representatives of Korea that could be sent.
I think when you compare them to the other teams as well, though, in like the tier 2 and maybe even some if we're going to talk about tier 1, I think that they have the firepower there as well, honestly, on some of these guys. So I think that can take them. I think that can take them the distance, honestly. But
I think they can hang, but I think just like when they try to play a non-Korean style, for example, I just don't think it's good enough.
Yeah, sorry, go on. I'm interrupting you.
I was just gonna say, like, I don't think that the information game from them, while they are the only team in Korea running it, is very good. It's like they make reads that are obvious because the other team is obvious. You know, like it's very easy to come up with an idea that works in that sort of style.
The other thing that I noticed a lot about NUTURN that could catch teams off if they're not willing to do their prep. Now, I'm only bringing this up, but for like the sake of completion, but surely there's no teams that are going to fail to do prep on teams going to Iceland. There's 10 teams there. It means you have to do research on 9 teams. As soon as the format is out and you see who's in your group, surely teams are going to be doing effective prep against everybody. But if you don't do effective prep against NUTURN, they have a lot of trap plays. They're probably the number 1 team in Iceland that's going to run trap plays. What I mean by that is that they have they're ready to throw utility at you as soon as they hear like an orb being taken in B main on Ascent, or when you walk up B long on bind against them. They're going to have like Lakia watching to take contact, and then as soon as he does, you're going to get breach stunned and breach flashed, and they're going to try and push you. They have set plays for that all around the map. Like they have Astra traps on Ascent, and they have their aggressive breach traps on both bind and on split. So if you're playing sloppily and you're not ready for that, then those could also catch teams off guard and net them some free rounds where they just get a pick or 2 picks off that, and they might be able to translate. I think as soon as you're ready for that, though, it's going to fall on its head because they just run the same plays over and over again. But it's a bit similar to version 1. Version 1 have a bunch of trap plays that they run on Ascent that I think are going to get figured out, and they're going to have to come up with new stuff for Iceland. So if NUTURN have a bunch of new things that they bring out at Iceland, if they're very creative with what they come up with, then maybe that is an area that they can get some wins out of too.
I think they will. There's like even things like they do with their smokes, for example. Like in this game, probably a couple rounds. No, it's on the defense side. Like they throw an assist smoke for solo on lane so that he can hide in the cubby a little bit more and then escape and stuff like that. And they have like random like spots where you would never expect a team to smoke or spend 2 Omen smokes or Astra smokes. They just put them right next to each other, like on bind, for example, right behind the truck, or on Ascent. They make a tunnel on like to block both sides of heaven, for example, so they can clear sight without any risk of having to worry about that guy right behind the box that's easily spammable. Like they do these weird sort of things that will take adjustment after seeing it one time or whatever, that are not that deep. When
they also ego challenge like fuck. Like the discipline level in Korea and in Asia in general is it's atrocious compared to the rest of the world. And I think it's just because other teams haven't punished it yet. Like they haven't been punished, so they don't realize that it's something they need to improve. And I think it's going to be a rude awakening in Iceland. Like watching Allow in particular go for these solo plays where he's so far ahead of the rest of his team, just trying to get that kill, and he dies. And if that happens with consistency, which it probably will in Iceland, they're just going to be down a man in these scenarios. And that coordination, that fundamental tightness and discipline to how you space yourself is the hallmark of good teams, and they don't have that yet. So that is really going to hurt them too.
It's kind of it is. It's just a problem across the whole region in Asia in the games I was watching. The teams don't really understand how to generate advantage if it doesn't come from a kill. Like there's not a lot of map control game going on. But we'll see. I still think that they can do all right.
I want to move on though from talking about NUTURN to actually discussing Vision Strikers as well a little bit. Because the big news here for a lot of people is not necessarily NUTURN is going to Iceland. It's Vision Strikers aren't going to Iceland, right? I feel like that is the big takeaway that most people in the scene took from this. Because Vision Strikers had this cult following. Like, different teams enjoyed the set plays that they ran. A lot of people online thought that they were just the best team in the world for some reason. I don't know why.
There was no team that I swear, there's no team out there that if you said something like, I don't think that they have the best firepower, people like Vision Strikers, and they would let you know that you're very wrong, and that RB is the best player in the world. And it's they were just so...
They got overhyped.
I mean, they got they got unbelievably
Well, I mean, you could argue
overhyped.
for a period they could have lived up to the hype for like a very short period,
in the time, just
because they had such
an
explosive style that no one else was really working with at all. But then that kind of just fell out of it, because now at this point it's like Balla was talking about earlier, like the game has evolved so much, like in terms of like even North America now understands like, guys, what if we pressure multiple parts of the map and then we just rotate and at this point there's just no free there's no free side executes anymore. Like there is no free side executes, especially with Astra being in play in Viper. Like it just doesn't exist anymore. So I at this point it's done. I think the experiment is over in Vision Strikers. We're gonna have to seal up that sarcophagus, and that's it's over. It's over, guys.
But we have been saying for a while, I remember us bringing up this point multiple times on Plat Chat, that Vision Strikers were very unlikely to be the god team out of Korea. But what was interesting was if Vision Strikers could inspire a generation of talent that was better than they were to play a structured tactical style. And I think some aspects of the Vision Strikers' excellence, like their set plays and stuff, I think some aspects of that have definitely bled into the region as a whole and kind of been some of the qualities that Korea has been the best at. I think the set plays, they still have really nice set plays and the ideas of what they want to do. Not Vision Strikers particularly, but like NUTURN, if we're talking about that, I think have been inspired in some sense by good defensive set plays with their aggression on bind, for example, which it doesn't use the same composition or anything like that, but the stuff that they've taken from Vision Strikers' heyday in November or December has led to an improvement of the scene overall, because you had to be able to beat Vision Strikers in order to continue. I think it's still been a good thing for Korea to have a team like that had such a unique vision on how the game was supposed to be played.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you can see that even bled into, it's bled into NUTURN a bit, the way that they approach the game, I think, to some extent as well. I mean, I don't know if we want to get into Vision Strikers.
What went wrong? What went wrong?
I mean,
Cliff
what went
notes.
wrong?
What was wrong with Vision Strikers?
Well,
why didn't they make it to Iceland?
They did the same thing.
Get the glove out again, bro.
Yeah, hit the glove out.
Get the fucking, and this time it's personal. Okay.
I mean, for me, it was. I have the same experience I always have when I watch Vision Strikers, which is like the first round, the pistol. Like, holy shit, they have this cool new execute. They're running up through grass on ascent. They have an Astra smoke down on door on A. They're pushing in through heaven. They're splitting the sight. They have the perfect stars. Molly goes down onto head. Like, they have this cool execute. And then they do a B split. And then they do those same two rounds over and over and over. On some of the rounds, the timings are just not there. The players aren't excellent within the executes. When it gets scrappy at actually supporting each other, at actually swinging at the right times. They don't trade off of each other well enough. They have cool ideas. They come into the game with cool ideas. But when it comes down to actually winning out the fights, they struggle to play a competent, fundamental game. And aside from that, they don't exactly. They just don't have a good map control game.
No,
they're really
so
telegraphed.
readable. Yeah.
And they just did the same hits over and over and over. And it's.
I also,
they didn't adapt.
They
did
also
not change.
put Stacks on Phoenix for a lot of this.
I mean,
so they're trying to. I think Stacks is still probably. Well, maybe Stacks isn't the best player in Korea, but I think he's certainly in the running, and he might still be the best player in Korea. It's just a little debatable when you have people like Lakia or whatever suggest that are around there. But but that's the thing. Yeah, the Phoenix is not the right role for him. He's the best. He's an incredible supportive player. His Breach was fantastic and really laid down the guidelines for everybody else in the world for here's the best way to play Breach. He really was that kind of caliber of player. He put it in the research. But they didn't even try to put Stax' Phoenix in a position to succeed. They didn't ever try to get the snowball going. They never had utility to help him while he was making plays or ulting. They didn't try and farm ult orbs for him and get him in a position to get that snowball rolling. No drones for him to try and push aggressively out. They just didn't do fucking anything to set him up for success. He wasn't even playing aggressive with Astra utility and A main on Ascent or anything. There was just nothing. He was just sat there on site and then he would flash and try and get kills.
It looked like they told him, please carry us. I mean, there were just so many moments where he is just inting in off of a flash, just trying to kill everybody.
Yeah.
On the second map, specifically, there were just so many times, rather than waiting for teammates for a retake or something, it's just, he felt like he had to carry at some point. He just needed to dunk on the other team, and that's the only way that they could have won. I don't know. I swear it's just the same problems that they've always had, and it hasn't really changed much.
It's the same problems. I think they try to fix it with a composition change by putting Stacks on the Phoenix, for example, and bringing RB back to Jett. I think that they're trying to get towards the style of the rest of the world, right? Where you can start to play fluid, right, with that. But I think that the way that they're being led is still so focused on their sets, their executes, the tactics. They have no fluidity where they can play the macro game every single round, where they can start farming orbs for Stacks, for him to go run it back and stuff like that. Why Phoenix is good in the first place. So because of that, because they're still so focused on the executes and stuff like that, it is very nice. But whenever there's something goes wrong in their execute, whenever they, for example, you're talking about that pistol round, Wyatt, on Ascent where they go up into heaven, the whole point of that was that they're going to be able to get up there and use King he's going to get a nanoswarm down, they're going to be able to push through, and they don't have to worry about the flank. But King dies. And what do you do then? There's nobody who has a backup plan. Nobody is now watching the flank because of it. The guy just walks up and kills a couple,
That was when they tried to do the rifle round the same way afterwards, right?
Yeah, and it failed the exact same way probably. Because when you go for this has been Asia in a nutshell in TAC FPS is so focused on all the executes. But if they lose one smoke or one flash or one molly or whatever it might be, it just falls apart. And that will always be Vision Striker's issue. I think the comp is going to be fine. I think even Stacks on Phoenix can be fine. I think that might be a stepping stone for them to learn how to go in the future. But right now, they couldn't run it at all.
Yeah, even when I see them running King on Viper as well, it's like the Viper is good for an overall strategy. It's not a tactic. And then they just don't get any use out of it because it's based on them playing around the Viper and reacting to where their opponents are and trying to take advantage of that. But because there's no plan in place, they just don't do anything with it. It was just useless, the entire map. And then also, King was having a nightmare of a series when it came to Ascent too. He was just getting caught out of position constantly. People holding in one-and-done positions all the time, not regrouping and using their advantages. Fundamental flaws.
I feel like that's kind of just Korea. I mean, when Korea's new to a genre, I feel like they find some early niche things about the genre that they're really good at and they can hone in on. And then they have to play some international competition to kind of get jump started a bit. They need a little bit of rising powder in their bread mix, and then they'll pop on up. Because otherwise, they're just kind of stuck in their own bubble, and that's kind of but you know, and in return, though, they are the best in world at various other genres. It's just for the genres they haven't traditionally been in. It's just like they're really good at finding the one thing that's like very niche for them to be great at, which is like these executes or like these very like interesting like just setups. But then they just lose focus of everything else that everyone else sort of gets because they've been in the game and those types of games so long, like the fundamentals of play and like trading and having different side hits and like map control and stuff like that. Like there's a lot of things that they just miss out on. So I feel like if NUTURN goes to Iceland, performs okay-ish, and then Korea walks away from this like, wow, we really want to not lose again because we hate losing, then there's a chance that that's like the industrial revolution for Korean Valorant.
Yeah,
I feel like
so
we're
it's
close
the
to that.
catalyst that
I feel like
starts
we're close to that.
the explosion. I could see that happening, yeah. I think it depends on, like, I don't know. Is it better for them to be successful and therefore people want more success, or is it better for them to get crushed and
No, it's
people
better not.
hate
It's
being
better
crushed?
for a middling, not crushed, not success, but in
Needs to be
between.
inspiring. That's
It
what
needs to be like there's good moments, but they lose.
I could
they need-
absolutely see
Sorry,
them.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, like I definitely agree. I could absolutely see NUTURN like almost beating Sharks, almost beating.
I think that, yeah, I think that could happen.
But
yeah.
I don't think they're going to.
No, I think
but
they
I
could
think that
take
they could
maps,
make
though.
it close
Yeah.
and feel like we could have done this.
Yeah.
I think Korea right now is in a state where it can go to the next level for them where they become crazy. Like,
I hope so.
again, they've always thrived on mechanics in every single game. League of Legends has been the same way. Overwatch, that's how they get their start. And something else needs to go right, like Avast is saying. I think to continue on the bread analogy, I think they've never had the yeast, They've never had the self-rising, somebody who's playing the game right, in Valorant, in Counter-Strike. They've never had that. They've always just had the proofing section where they can go to international and they go with the plan that they've always done, which is execute heavy, mechanics heavy style, and everybody tries to be that. They've never had a NUTURN in my mind where they are trying to run information games, they are trying to run defaults, they are trying to play the macro game, and I think that NUTURN might be the yeast that they can add, and they might be able to prove
the analogies that
The
I've started
yeast.
here.
I actually think that's a
Yeast
phenomenal
Iceland.
nickname for a team. Just the yeast.
Iceland's gonna have a
Is
yeast
it?
infection. Let's
it
go.
Is it really a good nickname for a team? To call them the yeast? To call them a bacteria? Is this the one? I'm not sure.
I think that's. I mean, it's not supposed.
Nice.
I think it's supposed to be an inspiring name. You know,
Yeah.
they're the catalyst. They're the yeast.
Well, why not call them like a starter then? Like they're the sourdough starter versus like
sourdough
a yeast.
Doesn't ring
Starters?
off the tongue like the yeast.
Yeah.
And you
Doesn't
can,
doesn't have
you can
quite-
go,
doesn't hit
"The
the same."
yeast,"
They're
you
the
know,
yeast
like-
from the east. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, that's
Let's
go.
It's got a ring to
That's
it.
why they pay him
It
the
was
big
right-
bucks. That's why this guy's
in front of our
filthy
face.
fucking rich.
Okay. Well, anyway, having had this discussion about and we're going to talk about the other regions. Remember next week when we're talking about LATAM, Southeast Asia, and Japan, because I've only watched a few games from Japan and Southeast Asia so far. I don't think it's inspiring.
Wasn't pretty.
No. We don't know anything about LATAM. They've been hyped up, but we have yet to do our digging into that region because we don't even know which team's going to make it through. But I would hazard a guess to say that if Infinity actually does win, then it doesn't bode particularly well because the NA teams have been playing against LATAM North teams already in scrims, and their perception was that they were like tier 2, tier 3. So if you're a LATAM hoper, you're kind of hoping that Crew crushes the final. But the final topic that I wanted to get to before the most important topic of the week, of course, your award, is the region slots have already been locked for Masters 3 Berlin. So they've already decided how many slots are being allocated to the region
Really?
for Berlin
Oh, I didn't see
before
this.
it's even happened. Yeah. So I can't remember whether they posted this in the same post as when they announced Berlin, but they've already got the slots in place, and it feels like extremely early to do something like this because they're not based on. If you're able to find it, I need my memory refreshed on how many slots exactly it is for each region. But I think it's like 2 slots for SEA, Japan, and Korea. 2 slots each for those regions. And I think Brazil only has 2 as well. So we're talking about like They don't.
Oh no.
Nobody really knows. For
Yeah.
as much as we claim to be experts and we've watched a lot of the games, we don't even know. We just think we have a good idea about which regions are better than others. But until Iceland actually happens, we don't know which regions are the best. And that feels like an important thing to factor into how many slots they should have in interregional competition.
Could have waited 20 days, right?
Yeah.
I mean that.
Well,
But I
mean,
understand
their hands are kind of tied. Like they have to make a decision.
I'm sure there's logistical.
Do they? Why do they have to make a
reasons
decision? Why do they have to make a decision now rather than at the end of Iceland?
Well,
I don't know.
Number one, like budgets and everything is probably already set.
Yeah, they have to.
Right?
They also have to determine They have to determine a lot of different things, like what are the travel budgets, because travel budgets vary based off the region. You have to think about like your support staff for the different regions. What do you have to have in place for them? Like there is a decent amount of potential pieces that have to be moved depending on how much you allocate each region.
And also, Champions is already set like this as well. Like that was already from the start. Champions had the regional breakdown as well, so you kind of have it play into whatever that already
I'm
was.
just a moron.
It didn't have these regional breakdowns though, did it?
I'm not sure. I'd have
I don't
to look.
believe it did.
I didn't even know this was news.
Wait,
Okay,
can you bring it back up?
Can you bring up here's the Liquipedia page, which is using the source in order to visualize it. So there's 4 spots from EMEA, which
cool.
I think seems good.
Yeah.
3 spots from North America.
I'm okay with that.
Which is that's all right.
Sure.
1 spot from LATAM. Okay, I'm fine with that as well. 2 spots from Brazil.
Not loving that.
Okay.
2 from Korea.
But also, 2 from Korea, 2 from Japan,
and 2 from Japan
2 from SEA. So Asia has 6 slots, whereas South America has 3, North America has... So I guess the whole of the Americas have 6 slots, the whole of Asia has 6 slots, and Europe has 4 slots, if you want to think about it like that.
That's fucked.
But
yeah, I mean,
I
don't see what their allocation, like what the reason for the allocation is. Like you could... How does SEA in Japan have so many slots? And like that's just
a lot of people were saying, well, it's just based on popularity, right? Japan got that 150k viewership recently.
Turkey? Where's Turkey?
Yeah,
I mean,
if that was the case, Turkey would have fucking 5 slots.
Yeah, I mean,
and Brazil would have more than 2 because
you would have 2 teams.
Yeah, exactly.
Just boaster and scream again.
But also, Japan's viewership that people were touting as being excellent at 150k was the one time that they allowed co-streaming, and they had what I assume to be an extremely popular streamer, because I think they still had like 40k on the stream, which is normal for the main stream, and they had over 100k watching on the co-stream. So I don't know whether that's a sustainable thing that's going to continue in the future. It might be, because that's how people like to consume their content in North America as well. And maybe that additional co-streaming options, if there were big co-streamers in Brazil or Southeast Asia or something, would boost the numbers there too. But Southeast Asia gets tiny viewership, and they're probably not that good if we're looking at the games.
I mean, I watched from the series that I watched with X10, which was the finals. It is very evident to me, at least, that Japan and Southeast Asia are the weakest regions coming into this.
It looked like that from what I'd seen as well.
I mean,
I do want to watch more, though, for next week. But yeah, it does seem
I
like
don't see the top. I don't see Crazy Raccoons or X10. I can't imagine them beating any other team other than the other at
it depends how bad the LATAM team is, actually. If they've been massively overhyped, and they actually are like a tier 2, 3, and A team, then possibly, yeah.
I don't even know if that, though, on it. I guess.
But the thing is, LATAM still has only 1 slot, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because if we're comparing it to the slots, LATAM, even if they are overhyped, they only have 1 slot, while SEA and Japan both have 2. So, like...
And Brazil only has... I don't understand. Brazil only has 2, but... I mean, I suppose NA has 3 there, so the thought was, Brazil has 2 and LATAM has 1, and then that's 3 from North America, 3 from South America.
I guess. I don't know exactly what the justification is here. I'm just posing the question, do these make sense?
No.
Because they don't make sense to me.
Based on skill, I feel like they don't make sense, even before Iceland.
But is that even the... Here's Riot's perspective, right? Is that even the thing that they should be focusing on? Skill at this point? Probably not. Like, what... They have a strategy where they're probably hard focused on trying to get Asia in, because if they do, that is something that no TAC FPS has done. You know, they've never been able to bring a Western TAC FPS to Asia. So if they are able to do that, then that is massive. And I think that's a good place for them to focus on. And I honestly am excited for that prospect. But in reality, what can they go off the results of Iceland to determine? Like Iceland isn't even going to be Iceland's going to be a shit show. Like,
but I do think
there's
it makes
going to be
sense.
so much random stuff happening, and there's only 10 teams, and the regions aren't already badly representative no matter what. Like, I can't see going off of Iceland being any better than anything they could do. I don't think they can do that.
I think it makes way more sense to allocate regions based on the previous slot. So, for example, if you have Masters, you have, so for example, you have a system where Japan, SEA, LATAM, Korea all have one slot, but if you're able to perform, there are, say, 2 open slots for Berlin. And it's just based on who performs best in the prior Masters. And then for the Masters the Masters 1 in 2022, who performed best at the previous Masters, they get the extra slots. And so you're fighting for not just
I think
winning,
that's a good system.
but you're trying to get extra. I think that's what they do with Rift Rivals as well, actually. Their mid-season I don't know how the fuck League of Legends is structured, but I think they have like a mid-season invitational or Rift Rivals or something where part of the prize is that you have an extra slot for your region at the end of the year when it comes to Worlds.
That's sick.
And I think that makes sense. Like, I feel like that's a pretty good measure. And maybe it doesn't have to be like the number 1 region gets an extra slot. Maybe it's like if you overperform expectations, you gain an extra slot for your region. Like, if you're,
I think that is a great system.
Region that's better.
I think that's a fantastic idea, great system. I just don't think it's possible to do yet. I don't think that there's the information available to do much. And the information that is available is population, player population, is viewership, is spending amount. Like, how much are these regions spending inside of the game and in relation to how many people are watching and playing and whatever.
Yeah.
All that stuff is stuff that exists. Everything else, like expectations on how a team does,
Here's another question. What happens when the game officially releases in China and they have to give invite slots to China? Do they just cannibalize the other Asian slots? And they're just like, yoink, we'll take those back. Steal a Japanese slot, steal a Southeast Asian slot, steal a Korean slot, and throw 3 to China? Like, that could also happen.
I feel like Korea would still be its own distinct region because Korea is like has carved out its own spot, like always, like essentially. So it's tough to imagine Korea being absorbed, but SEA and Japan maybe.
I could see them giving 2 slots to China and taking them away from Japan and SEA.
I think we could probably be pretty confident that we'll end up being in the regional breakdown that League of Legends has. LPL, LCK, whatever the hell the Southeast Asia one is called. Like, those all exist in League, and I think that their structures there already exist for their esports, so they'll probably stick with that. I think that's probably safe to assume. I don't know how the slots are going to end up being allocated, because that'll probably be different, but it'll probably be the same formula even still.
What do you think about the idea of what this really does for, like, Berlin and for champions at the end of the year in terms of competitiveness? Do you think we'll end up having a situation where people are more inclined to watch the NA Challengers finals because they believe that to be higher skill level than Iceland overall or Berlin overall if it has so many teams from lesser regions in it? Or are people still just going to be attracted to the hype of it being a big inter-regional tournament?
I think people will still be attracted to the hype, and I still think it'll have the best teams and be the best tournament in regards to skill as well. Yeah, I think that'll still be the case. Actually, the more I'm sitting here thinking about it, I mean, Ball does make a great point about trying to bring those regions into the fold in regards to being within the FPS community more, which is very true. But also, I do think those regions also deserve a bit of time as well, in regards to just not being written off. Like because they are not going to do well at Iceland. If they do, that would be
a fucking miracle.
It would be a huge fucking surprise if they did really well at Iceland. What is more likely to happen is that they're going to have a lot to take away from Iceland and can then hopefully improve, and we'll see a higher level of competition when it comes time for Berlin.
Right.
That would be the real hope. You're bringing those scenes in, and hopefully they'll be able to advance quite a bit in regards to their own play from.
And so in the Berlin example, it's not just NUTURN that are benefiting from their experience in Iceland. It's NUTURN and Damwon Gaming who are benefiting from their experience at Berlin. It's not just X10 that are benefiting from Iceland. It's X10 and its Full Sense that are benefiting from Berlin experience. Yeah, I can see the argument there, sure.
And think about how it actually affects the Masters 3 quals, right? It's no longer in Korea. It's no longer like, oh, Vision Strikers is already qualled. Like, what can I do? It's now like, oh, there's actually slots. Like, I can make this as one of the players who are down in the gutter in Korea.
Sure.
You know, it gives them more hope, more faith, more possibilities, and more motivation.
Okay. And I mean, I can see the arguments there.
I don't know. Even when you think about it, like, I don't know. Well, yeah, the only one I think I'm maybe disappointed about is having more slots for Brazil. Other than that, 3 NA teams. Dude, who else? If it's Sentinels version 1 and whatever, Envy or 100 Thieves instead.
Who was third place in North America?
It was Cloud9.
Cloud9.
But my point being, like, past having a few teams, are we really, like, dying to get then Envy there if it's Sentinels, V1, Cloud9? Like, oh, shit, NA needs 4 slots so Envy can go. And then in EU, it's, you know, it'll be like, what, Fnatic, Liquid Gambit, and my brain isn't working, Oxygen.
Was it Oxygen? Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it would have been Oxygen.
Next time, though, it's going to be... I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to
say...
No,
don't say it.
No, but...
No.
They can lose in a semi and still make it.
But
they're going to lose in the quarters then, bro.
But if... no, but genuinely, if those... I don't know. At some point, it's like, you got enough teams, and I think I'm happy with what I'm seeing anyway for the top-level competition. Like,
right.
How many teams do you really need to see from the top level of each region competing against each other at these events?
It's also a chicken and egg scenario, too, because, like, where do you start? Like, you can make the argument was like, well, these regions need to develop more before you give more slots. Well, it's like, you only have 2 options to develop them. You either throw them in international competition, or you invest more for their local infrastructure and their local system. But like, then the argument still is like, well, is that going to entice enough people to get eyes on it to where, like, it's one thing if you're like, oh, I have like a $50,000 tournament I can compete in, but then it's like, well, I have a $200,000 international tournament that I can compete in if I get good enough of this game, and like we have like a good shot of making it because we have 2 slots. So I think, you know, even though it's kind of just like you have to throw in some VC capital into the fire a bit, you know. Before
I want to see a bit of
it.
capital expended for more cups in Asia generally, though, whether that's LAN or whether that's online even, but so that, because Korea is pretty far ahead of SEA and Japan right now in terms of what I'm seeing. Like, I don't even think that they're necessarily in the same tier too. Like, NUTURN seems pretty far ahead of Crazy Raccoons in X10 from the small amount that I've watched. And so I think just even having local, regional LAN events with the Asian teams would be extremely beneficial to the Japanese scene, to the SEA team, to the Chinese scene when it launches as well. Being able to get on the same level and compete. There were tournaments, the Extreme AEW Masters or whatever, I can't remember exactly what they were called. But those were good blending pots of the different Asian teams. And I think that's more of like a manageable, tangible benefits where you see, oh, Korea is X far ahead of us, we need to do these improvements. If you're just getting 13-0'd by Sentinels, you're coming out of Berlin going, well, my ass hurts, but I don't have much else to take away. Like, it's, I don't know.
Especially with no yeast. Like, you got to get the yeast in the ass.
Yeah, you got to get the yeast in there,
get the fucking yeast in there and work it a little bit. Anyway, I thought that would be a nice controversial topic to end on as well, to rile all the people up. And now it's time for the most wholesome award of the week. Wyatt's weekly award.
Wholesome one.
Oh, it's wholesome.
It's Wyatt's weekly award.
This ball is crushed. Man, what a shot.
Man, what a shot.
This week, the weekly award. This could have gone in the news section, honestly, but it's going to be, we have a bit of a memoriam for Tyler Ninja Blevins. Who's stepped down from his professional Valorant team time in. He's taking a break. He's playing League of Legends. He's winning League of Legends games while eating sandwiches and
looking at
that his wife delivered without asking, by the way. She didn't even ask for the sandwich.
He'll no longer didn't even ask. What a life. But he's stepping down from time in, and kind of unfortunate, honestly. It was kind of cool that Ninja was just competing in Valorant on like a pretty good NA team for quite a while.
It
Did
wasn't
he phase that one
there
time.
was no clout farming involved in the slightest. It was.
My favorite tweet.
Go down to the show that GIF.
Good. That's good.
That was
I feel like
we
need to start a You know they have like on Team Fortress TV, Wyatt and Josh, how they had the favorite Banny tweets. I want like a thread. I want a favorite Ninja tweets. Thread.
He's got some good ones.
That is so goddamn
The
funny.
guy's living his best life. He's out here just.
I mean, he's getting sandwiches without even asking.
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
I have to make my own sandwiches.
I'm bad at video games.
Yep.
I'm not gonna comment on the rest. I shouldn't have started that sentence.
But just
Wyatt
bad
comes
video
into Sideshow, bro, like he had no shirt on. Yep.
Just bad at games.
I don't wear a bra either. It's pretty good. It's very freeing.
But no, but genuinely, it was cool that Ninja. Yeah, like you're saying, it wasn't like he wasn't trying to get fame and riches from competing.
No, he's already got 'em.
It seemed like he was just genuinely competing because he liked competing in the game. And it was cool that he was playing. You just see Ninja just on a team competing in Valorant. Yeah. I remember there was even the one time Mr. Beast called him up. Ninja, we need you in LA. And he said he would go to do like a game show with Mr. Beast, but then there was a Renegades tournament, so he had to call Mr. Beast back and sorry, Beast, I can't come. I got a 10K Renegades tournament, and he stayed home and he competed.
Yeah,
it was cool. No, it was cool. It was cool.
He was legit scrimming every single night. Like
he was dedicated. Yeah,
in the business. That takes a lot of time. So I totally understand. Like,
Fortnite sucks. Imagine just spending 50,000 to say your game's dead in a Reddit comment, you know? Just be like, yeah.
How on earth do you get a 10-minute video out of one donation?
I think he probably does it to he donates to a lot of people.
Oh, I see.
I'm in one of those, dude. That's my claim to fame.
Really?
Not from Mr. Beast, though. It was another guy, Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got like I don't know. I doubt you can find it, but there's some video on his channel when I was streaming Fortnite, when I was like playing Fortnite, competing in that game, whatever. I was streaming all the time, and he just randomly gifted me 20 subs. And I'm in a video somewhere where he made like fucking 20 grand probably off of the ad revenue. It's got like 10 million views or something. And I remember, I mean, I don't get excited about things.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, cool, man, or whatever, like just some shit reaction. But that's my claim to fame.
The funniest example of that I've seen was Critical was doing I think it was at Christmas. He was donating subs to people. And he went and he was looking. He said, "Oh, should we donate a sub? Let's see if anyone's playing Overwatch. The sad bastards." And he found a Hex, one of the casters for the Overwatch League. And he went into Hex's stream, and Hex was molding. Hex was like truly in fucking Tilt City, really angry about whatever was happening in the game. Just like, I can't fucking do it. Like, this is ridiculous. And I think Critical dropped 50 gifteds in the chat, and Hex was so angry he didn't even realize. And Critical eventually was just like, dude, this guy's just locked in. Like, he was looking for a reaction, and Hex just didn't realize for like, I want to say it was like 5 full minutes of him just ranting. And then he looks at his chat and he's like, oh, did someone give some subs?
Oh my God.
Holy shit.
It's phenomenal.
Christ. Well, anyway, have fun in League, Ninja. All that League of Legends you're playing.
Is he going and competing in the LCS? Is he going to be a new LCS player?
I mean, he got 2 kills in bot lane while eating a sandwich.
You can see him acting in whatever movies soon. Like, I guarantee it. COVID's done. He's back to business.
Oh, dude, Ninja's definitely going to be in like Fast and Furious 11. He's definitely going to have some cameos like that.
I want him to floss in a movie. I just don't
on top of a Fast and Furious car racing.
Who did that artwork?
Pictures?
They have butchered his nose.
This is all from his Twitter.
Ninja's Vin Diesel flossing.
Look at that. Look at the gamer energy in that pic.
Okay,
You can just feel it.
That really, yeah, that's some. He looks like a ghoul from Fallout.
Can we retract the award?
He can smell.
Right.
He can smell his opponents with that
Do
sort of
we
schnoz
have
right
anything
there.
pressing for the end of this episode that we need to talk about? Any breaking news happen while we were live?
I was hoping.
Don't know. I don't know of any that was. Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I
There's
did have a piece
whole-
of breaking news, by the way, Josh. If
Oh,
we
yeah?
want to talk about this, apparently Liquid's gonna sign Navera. The guy, he was on the 6-man. He was a 6-man for Vitality CS:GO, and apparently he is going to Liquid supposedly.
Yeah, this is a now report. I see
It
that.
literally just came out from now. Yeah,
As in, like,
What?
Scream's brother?
like Scream's brother is going to Valorant.
Really?
Yeah, Liquid Valorant. Yes.
And
Yeah.
they're going to play with a 6-man roster.
Oh, well.
Well,
no, they're
maybe
not.
they might be losing someone.
Yampy comes to mind.
Because Yampy is heading to CS because he's been unbanned. But why would they make this decision before
Speculation.
Iceland? Why are they not focused on fucking winning Iceland? Why are they having these
this
conversations
happens.
now?
Apparently, the move is supposed to happen after Iceland.
Yeah, but there must be internal things in motion, right? Like, that is really interesting.
I don't know. It's
Was he-
strange, though.
was he
It's
good?
I don't know,
strange.
man.
Was he
I'm
good?
refreshing.
He was on the come up in CS, I thought. I haven't watched a lot of CS since Valorant has come
Well,
out.
he
I
hasn't
don't
played.
really
He
know what's
hasn't played for
happening, but-
Vitality for a while. He's been
Okay.
stuck because like Valve been ruling about 6-man rosters or something, and he couldn't play. It was something like that, if I remember properly.
Okay.
Huh. Well?
Nivera is close to joining his big brother Scream in the Liquid Valorant team. That's such... Yeah, I mean, it's very understandable for Yampy to have these questions about his future, but I really did appreciate his like public statement of, I'm not thinking about it until Iceland is finished. Because I felt that was... Like, they have a really legitimate chance of winning Iceland. Liquid is one of the teams that you would have as like... They've got a great chance of being able to do it. And if they're already making plans for... I don't know, man. Maybe it'll be like the Swan song, and they'll go and they'll pound, and then they'll make some changes, and they'll maybe not be as good in the future. Who knows? Or maybe they'll be even better. Fuck knows.
Probably wasn't a long I mean, Scream probably just knocked on his door in his bedroom. Hey, you want to play with us? Like, I don't know. They probably weren't thinking about it too hard, honestly.
Yeah, maybe
He's
not.
just getting his brother.
Yeah.
He probably sees him often, so... Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Interesting.
that's... Okay.
I'm,
Is that
I'm
all the
still
news?
terrifyingly refreshing Sentinel's Twitter with all this.
Yeah, what is
BS.
going on
I
here?
hope-
Who's
I
got
hope
the
they're not
secret
trolling me.
juice?
Dapper just tweeted, might become religious after this week. We are all good, which I assume is a reference to FNS's all good tweet.
What
I'm
is FNS's
terrified.
all good tweet?
He just tweeted all good. Like, man, he's like,
Yeah.
There's some weird
This-
shit going on behind the scenes, and I don't know what it's involved.
I don't know what's
we're
happening.
gonna go
There's
let's go over to
a
his house.
fucking monoxide leak. I feel like I'm in a CO2 leak right now. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. Well,
Let's
there
go
was
find Dapper.
the Sentinels players were all tweeting some really weird shit, and I was assuming that there was going to be some news that was hidden about something going wrong or something with the team or a player not being able to travel. Obviously, to get to Iceland, you have to have like a negative COVID test and quarantine, and I don't know. I assume like you have to be able to travel as well.
Yeah, have a passport.
Have a passport,
Tens
that kind of
realize
shit,
he doesn't
yeah.
have a passport. Oh, shit.
So I assumed it was something like that was going to impede them, but if it's all good, it's all good. I don't fucking know. I mean, I'd love for someone to dig into that, though, and find out what's happening.
It's
Maybe
all
we'll
good.
address it
Please.
next week. The only other big information, I think, is that it seems quite unlikely that we're going to have a back chat for next week. So instead, we're going to be producing... I haven't told Avast or Balla this either. Me and Wyatt have just cooked up this idea just on our own.
Breaking news.
But breaking news for all people involved. We're going to be producing some team previews before we go into Iceland.
I can't do that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. We were just doing the team previews with a couple of us before anyways. Don't worry about it, mate. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But we're going to do some team previews of like, here's the cliff notes of what you need to know for X10 coming in. Here's the cliff notes of what you need to know for Vikings coming in. Who are their best players? What's their style? This kind of stuff. Because you could get that by watching all of our podcasts constantly, or you might not have enough time in your day to sit down and watch 3 hours every single Wednesday. And I appreciate that. Some people's schedules are busy. So subscribe to our YouTube. We'll have those coming out at some point over the course of the next week. Might not be doing all of the teams involved, but we'll be doing most of the lesser known teams so that people have a chance of being able to catch up and get clued into the main storylines going on.
Sounds nice.
And then
Sounds
we'll be
nice.
back next week with another episode where we'll be doing previews, bracket previews and predictions and get into the real meat of who we think is going to win. Hopefully by that point the format is going to be released, or we'll have to break some ribs over in Riot and try and force the format out of somebody.
What comment should people leave?
What comment should people leave?
What group stage do we want
I don't know.
as a format?
What, sorry?
I said, what group stage do we want as a format? Like, you know, round robin, GSL? What do you want the format to be?
Sure. Comment that. And if you think that you can come up with a GSL style system with 10 teams, by all means, try and find a system that works for that. All right, yeah, there you go. There's Balla's idea. And as for that, we'll see you next week. Goodbye.